Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish on Tuesday, May 21st. Hatsqualin, Queestalukmuk, Classicahomish, Oweomeo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Council, before we adopt the agenda, I'd like to move that we move items 8B, 2, 3, and 4 to follow the timed items. So they would come after item 7A2. With that change, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any notice of motion, Council? Seeing none. We have two delegations. One delegation and one proclamation request. First delegation is Karen Vanzella, Vice President of the Squamish Hospital Foundation Board. You can speak at the podium. It'd be great. But just don't touch the microphone, it's quite sensitive.
The Squamish Hospital Board would like to thank the Squamish Council for proclaiming May Squamish Hospital Foundation Awareness Month. The foundation works with Vancouver Coastal Health, Squamish General Hospital medical staff, and the community to identify equipment and special projects needs not covered by the annual provincial or regional health budgets. With the valuable help of our donors, we raise essential funds to advance patient care in the Sea to Sky corridor. Following is a list of purchases we have assisted within the last year. $4,000 in additional nurse education. $10,000 equipment for Hilltop House to enhance comfort and well-being for residents. $4,000 for a CCHD monitor, non-invasive monitor to detect critical heart defects in newborns. $8,900 Billy-One, a non-invasive jaundice meter for newborns. $1,300 hospital-grade breast pump for maternity ward. $1,400 CPAP machine to assist patients breathing post-surgery. $136,432 towards the new ultrasound machines, which was our 2018 fundraising goal achieved. Our main fundraiser each year is our golf tournament in September. Funds raised from the tournament this year have been dedicated to assist in the purchase of a new bus for Hilltop. This bus will replace the existing 11-and-a-half-year-old bus and will be able to take 4 wheelchairs and 2 other residents, giving the residents the opportunity to go out shopping, have social connections, and go to healthcare visits within the community. Thank you for your time, and if you would like any further information, please contact the Squamish Hospital Foundation at gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for all the work that the Squamish Hospital Foundation does. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the update. Council was all wearing purple shirts. I'm now the only one because it is Local Government Awareness Week. So we are wearing these in recognition of our staff and the importance of local government. We had a proclamation request. Anyone here for that? That Council proclaimed July 3 to 9, 2019 as the BC Child and Youth and Care Week in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So I suspect there's going to be people that will raise their hand for consideration of unscheduled public attendance. So a regulatory bylaw like the one on the camping regulations that we're speaking to tonight doesn't generally provide for public comment. But what I wanted to do, and I've sent an email to the woman who organized the petition, is provide people an avenue to speak tonight. But I would suggest that maybe 2 or 3 folks speak on behalf of the whole group. Because council, this is at leave of council, so council will vote on the people who come forward. And if 4 councillors vote in favor, then that person can speak. So, is there anyone who would like to speak? So I'll ask Ms. Pigeon to come forward first. This is not your time to speak to council, but actually just to make your case for being able to speak to council. So we'll give you 2 minutes to do that.
Thanks for the opportunity to make that exception for us. My name is Thomasina Pigeon, Rannick Street. My residential, well, my address that I use is 37768 Second Avenue. I initiated the petition, which currently has close to 3,000 signatures. The reasons why we do acknowledge as a community that there is a big problem with irresponsible campers, but we see that this bylaw does not address the issue. Rather, it targets people who sleep or camp in a tent or vehicle, which can. We have a fear that people when you get replaced.
I'm going to ask you not to speak to the issue right now.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Okay.
to say why you need to speak to council tonight versus 2 weeks from now.
Okay, I need to speak to you guys tonight because you guys are addressing the bylaw. You guys are going through the first, second, and third readings this evening, and there's a lack of data, public consultation, and the bylaw is not a solution to the problem at hand. And I would like to go over some solutions and also serious concerns about the bylaw regarding Section 7 of the Charter of Rights, which the bylaw does officially violate. Is that 2 minutes?
That's great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Do you have a question?
I'd like
This
to
is-
move that we hear from Ms. Pigeon in the unscheduled public
I was
comment.
going to wait until we get
Okay.
more of them.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a seat. I've got your name.
Okay.
And then, has someone else had their hand up in the front row here? Just state your name and why you feel it's important for you to speak to council tonight.
My name is Rufio West. I'm a resident of Squamish. I've been visiting for 12 years, living here for 2, and I represent the Vehicle Residents of Squamish Advocacy Group. I have some data which I have forwarded on to council. I hope that you have it available to you. And I would like to present on that and the official position as the advocacy group for people living in the vehicles.
All right. So if there are folks that feel they'll have other points to make that are different to what Ms. Pigeon and Mr. West are going to make,
So my name's Nathan Cookithus. I'm a business owner here in Squamish, and I see that this is going to have an impact on the businesses of Squamish and the tourism. So I'd like an opportunity to address council with concerns that are specific to the impact that it could have in this area. And I know that it's going to be proposed to go through in 3 hearings tonight, so I'd like to have the opportunity to address it now, not in 2 weeks.
Nathan, could you spell your last name for us, please?
Aukathas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Ms. McCall?
I'm Peter Lesage. I live in Squamish, and I'd just like to speak. I've been camping in Squamish and British Columbia my whole life. I believe Squamish is a unique place. British Columbia is a unique place as a result of camping. We have statutory rights to camp here in British Columbia. It's one of the few places, if not the only place in the world, where 5% of the land is privately owned and 95% of the land is publicly owned.
Mr. Sage, why do you feel you need to speak to council tonight?
Because I think that council is overreaching in their authority, and I think it's just, I think there are many laws that encompass these concerns already. And so I think this additional bylaw, which I question the legality of, but also the efficiency of, it's going to cost the district a lot of money to police and patrol these things, and it would cost the same amount of money to send somebody to go pick up garbage.
So we just need to stick to the reason why you need to speak to council tonight instead of 2 weeks from now, and then later in the agenda, after a vote of council, we'll give people the opportunity to speak.
Okay, well, that's why I think it's necessary, because you're voting on the bylaw tonight, are you not?
We are. Thank you.
2 weeks would be too late.
Okay, we have 4 folks. Did I see your hand, Ms. McCall?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Maureen McCall. the Executive Director for Squamish Helping Hand Society. And I believe the reason that I should speak this evening is because I represent a lot of underserved, underheard people who this bylaw may detrimentally affect.
Thank you. So we have 5. And so council is going to vote, and they may not allow up to 10 people to vote, so, or to speak tonight. So if you feel you really are going to say something differently than the folks that have already put their hand up, then come forward.
Hi, my name is Gord Conkin. I live in Paradise Valley. I think we really need to listen to what Thomasina has to say tonight. Thank you.
So you don't wish to speak, Mr. Conkin? Thank you. Okay, council.
I'll move that we hear from the 5 people who have expressed an interest in speaking to us in unscheduled public attendance.
Seconded by Councilor Herford. Any discussion, council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is that right? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So we have 2 timed items: a development variance permit number 149 and development variance permit number 151. Then we will hear the camping bylaw because I've amended the agenda. The staff will speak to the bylaw, and then I will have these 5 people come up in order and speak to the bylaw prior to council's deliberations. So that will be the order this evening. So we'll proceed with development variance permit number 149, 40800 Mountain Place. So there's an opportunity for public comment on this development variance permit, but I'll have staff make their report first, and then I'll call for members of the public who wish to speak to this variance. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. For consideration tonight is development variance permit number 149, which requests 2 variances to permit the construction of a garage with a secondary suite above, attached to an existing single-unit dwelling in the Garibaldi Highlands. 40800 Mountain Place is located in the Garibaldi Highlands, in the cul-de-sac at the northernmost end of Highlands Way North. The subject property is zoned RS1 residential. The OCP land use designation is residential neighborhood. The surrounding properties are also zoned RS1 and also designated residential neighborhood. The applicant is seeking 2 variances to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200 to permit the construction of a garage with a secondary suite above. The first requested variance seeks to reduce the front yard setback of the RS1 zone from 7.62 meters to 2.5 meters. The second requested variance seeks to reduce the interior side setback from the required 2.13 meters to 1.66 meters. Staff proposed pushing the structure further back into the rear yard, but the applicant noted that a fence had recently been constructed in the rear and they would prefer to retain the fence. Also, the second story of the addition would overhang to the fence in the rear, providing future tenants a covered walkway to their front entrance. The intent of front yard setbacks is to ensure that use of a property does not negatively impact traffic circulation and parking, to ensure sufficient space exists for services, to allow room for open space, and to provide filtration areas for stormwater runoff. In some cases, variances are justified without hardship when the intent of the bylaw is not compromised, or when the variance facilitates infill development in appropriate growth areas in alignment with growth management policies. Staff note that the majority of driveways along Mountain Place significantly encroach into district road dedication because the cul-de-sac is not paved to the edge of road dedication. Therefore, the absolute setback of the property line from the road is 8.6 meters or 28 feet. And that's shown with that arrow. Legislative and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. Development sign was installed on the property and the project was posted to the online development showcase. Variance notification was delivered to neighboring properties within 100 meters of the subject property. The applicant submitted several letters in support of the application. Those are attached to a report package tonight as attachment 2. Staff are recommending that council authorize the issuance of DVP 149. Alternatively, council may not authorize the issuance of DVP 149.
Questions?
Any questions for clarification, Council? Council Pena?
So reading the report, it seems that, there's no hardship mentioned. It seems that this would be a common situation on cul-de-sacs. So if that's correct, why would we not consider just a general bylaw amendment as opposed to a DVP for this one particular?
Through you, Mayor, that is something that could be considered through a bylaw amendment. In this situation, the cul-de-sac does make it difficult to add on to the existing home, so it was considered a variance situation.
Councilor Bird?
Thank you. You mentioned the applicant not wanting to move a freshly installed fence to accommodate this. How much room is there behind the fence? I couldn't quite see from this.
From the rear of the building to the fence, it's about 2 meters. From the fence to the rear property, it's about 29 feet.
So, in looking at the layout of the existing building on the property, it looks like that building was built to not encroach on the setback. And now we've got a fence in the way, but plenty of room on the side. So, is there a downside in pushing this proposed structure back that you're aware of, besides the fence?
Through you, Mayor, there is no downside that staff are aware of.
There's no elevation back there or anything that's limiting that.
Through you, Mayor, there's nothing that I'm aware of other than the rear setback.
Councilor Pena?
Am I correct in thinking that we don't really have tools at this point to ensure that the secondary suite is used for long-term rental as opposed to short-term rental?
Through Mayor, there is no mechanism at this point. Although the use is not permitted through the bylaw.
What was that?
The use of short-term rental is not permitted through the bylaw currently. There's no mechanism at this point.
It's not an allowable use. Do any of the variances, because people are encroaching on our road right of way, do these variances in the future encroach on that, or do we still have those 8 meters?
In conversation with the engineering department, there's no medium or long-term plan to pave out the road dedication, so they expect that it to remain.
And fire trucks can get in there, and it meets all of our safety standards.
It does meet the minimum width for a cul-de-sac or subdivision development control bylaw.
Any other questions, council, before I go to the public? Councilor Pena?
The letters of support, are they from everyone or some people on the cul-de-sac or people on nearby streets, or is it all?
Through you, Mayor, I don't know whether it's all the residents of the cul-de-sac, but they were submitted by the applicant.
We couldn't see the addresses, so Councilor Pettingill is asking whether they were adjacent to this property or some distance from this property. I think they're all in Mountain Street. All right, so we'll go to the public. The proponent and members of the public have the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variance to section 6.6 minimum setbacks for principal buildings of the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. The front setback from 7.62 meters to 2.5, and the interior side setback from 2.13 meters to 1.66 meters. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak to these variance requests, and after I've confirmed it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and the street you live on. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. So on this DVP, is there anyone that wishes to speak? Yes. Welcome.
My name is Mike Mancapella. I live on Eagle Run Drive in Brackendale. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that the planning department said and that the councilors asked about the project. So the main reason for moving the building, so it's a 25-foot rear yard setback for the primary residence, and this is in addition to the primary residence. So really, we'd only be able to move it back to that fence that we spoke about, which is, I can't remember how much room.
29 feet.
No, sorry, from the fence to the building that we're proposing. Like the overhang that we're creating, I think is like 3 feet, 4 feet. So that's how much further back we could actually move the addition to this building. We kind of explored all options as far as putting a carriage house, adding to the other side of the building. There's not really anywhere else on the property that would work. The other thing is we tried to retain all the trees in the front yard. So we came to the planning department a number of times with a bunch of different sort of versions of what we had. We've retained all the trees, created an extra parking spot. As mentioned, the cul-de-sac makes it very challenging to kind of stay within that front setback. And the reason that the building is coming off of the existing building the way it is just solely for like ease of construction. We're trying to keep the budget as low as possible. We're lining up roof lines, trying to make it as easy as we possibly can for the homeowners.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this development variance permit? Seeing none, I'll go back to council for any final questions. Don't see any. Council, what's your pleasure?
Just I have a quick question.
Yep.
Can you clarify there's a discrepancy there between the 3 feet overhang of how much the building can move and the 20 some odd feet of yards to the rear setback? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor, the rear setback from our S1 lot is 7.62 meters or 25 feet. And then to the rear fence line is about 29 feet, and then to line up the house there, they wouldn't be able to move it back more than about 3 feet.
Any further questions?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Any comments? Councillor Race?
Thank you. And I think this is, the variance permit is discretionary, but I think this is one of those circumstances where this is the right process. There are a number of oddly shaped lots in the district that just don't always fit within the, and so buildings don't always fit within the zoning bylaw restrictions. And I think this is a suitable case for actually varying those zoning bylaw restrictions and allowing this to go ahead. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor French?
And I'll note that Mountain Place looks as though it has 6 residences. The subject property, and then 5 more. We have 4 letters from people who are showing that they live on Mountain Place. So 4 of 5 neighbors have indicated to us that they support what their neighbor is up to.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up is Development Variance Permit number 151 for 38243 Cleveland Avenue. Same folks, different DVP. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with Community Planning and Infrastructure. For consideration tonight is Development Variance Permit number 151, which requests 3 variances to permit a cannabis retail location at the Chieftain Plaza. The subject property is located in downtown Squamish at Unit 38243 at Cleveland Avenue within the Chieftain Plaza. The specific unit is in red above, while the Chieftain Plaza lot is outlined in green. The other tenants of the Chieftain Plaza include a motor vehicle parts retail location, a liquor store, a physiotherapy location, and a fitness center. The subject property is zoned C4, downtown commercial. Adjacent properties are zoned C4 and C2, which is service station. The OCP land use designation is downtown gateway, as are the adjacent lots. DBP 151 proposes to vary the following sections of the zoning bylaw. Section 4.37A to reduce the minimum distance between a site containing another cannabis retail location from 300 meters to 145 meters. Section 4.37B to reduce the minimum distance between a site containing a school and a cannabis retail location from 300 meters to 145 meters. And section 4.37G, which would allow for cannabis retail to be permitted on a parcel with frontage on Cleveland. Chieftain Plaza fronts Cleveland Avenue is shown above. This map shows the distance parcel to parcel of the proposed cannabis retail location and the approved cannabis retail location at Hunter Place, which is approximately 145 meters away. Ecole Squamish Elementary and Housetown Secondary at 38430 Buckley Avenue, which is approximately 145 meters away. And Ecole Les Aiglons located on the Capilano University property at 1150 Carson Place, which is approximately 169 meters away. The intent of the 300-meter buffer, which was implemented in June 2016, is to mitigate concerns around youth access or exposure and are based on best practices taken from other jurisdictions, including the City of Vancouver, Seattle, and Denver. Minimum distancing requirements from other jurisdictions are listed in the table above. Staff note that the buffers are supported by the recommendations of the Federal Task Force on Cannabis Legalization and Regulations, which recommended that with respect to cannabis retail, there should be limits on the density and location of storefronts, including appropriate distance from schools, community centers, public parks, and so on. That there should be no co-location of alcohol or tobacco and cannabis sales wherever possible. There should be dedicated storefronts with well-trained, knowledgeable staff, and access should be available via direct-to-customer mail order. 2 previous variances to the district's zoning bylaw conditions of use related to the distancing provisions have been granted. A previous variance was approved in September of 2016 to reduce the school buffer from 300 meters to 240 meters. Another variance was granted for the Hunter Place Mall in 2018, which varied the distance from a school to 35 meters, and the clause that doesn't allow cannabis retail on Cleveland. For comparison, liquor store use is only permitted outright in the CD 37 and CD 69 zone, both which are on parcels that are undeveloped at this time. All proposed stores must go through a site-specific rezoning process, and all existing liquor stores in Squamish are legally non-conforming. There is a legally non-conforming liquor store located in the Chieftain Plaza and is adjacent to the proposed location for the cannabis retail. Tobacco is regulated very similarly to cannabis with buffering requirements, which include not being sold within 300 meters of a site containing a school. If a tobacco retail business was established prior to May 2017, it is permitted. This includes the vape shop, which is less than 60 meters from Housetown Secondary School. Legislative and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. The level of IAB2 public participation has been consulted. 2 development signs were installed on the property, and the project was posted to the online development showcase. Variance notification was delivered to adjacent properties within 100 meters of the subject property. 20 letters have been received in support of the application and are included on blue paper this evening. Responses are generally supportive. Referral responses were received from the Capilano University, Ecole Les Aiglons, Vancouver Coastal Health, and School District number 48. All referral responses were not in support of the proposed reduction of the 300-meter buffer and voiced concerns around the potential negative effects on students, employees, and visitors to the school sites, given the close proximity of a cannabis retail business. Staff are recommending that council not authorize the issuance of DBP 151 as requested variances are contrary to the intent of the buffer regulation. Alternatively, council could refer DBP 151 back.
Sorry, those doors have to remain
Oh,
open.
sorry.
It's an open council.
Okay. Sorry, did you finish there?
Sorry.
Council, any clarifying questions? Councilor Pengill.
So it was expressed to me that there's some thought that the province may be prioritizing the license it gives based on which businesses were or weren't operating outside of the law before the legalization of cannabis. So if we were to agree with the staff recommendation and not approve at this point, but then the other business that has been granted a variance, if it didn't get its provincial license, would this one then have an opportunity to come back or jump to the queue for another review? Or would it just require a normal resubmission if the one wish to try again later?
I may have an answer to that for you, Mayor. If council wouldn't approve this permit and the applicants still wanted to reapply, so they would, for the exact same thing, they wouldn't be able to do an application with the district for 6 months. So there would have to be a 6-month period before they can reapply. We don't have any information on the details of how the province does the license processing, so I don't think we could comment on that at this time.
Any other questions? Is this use co-located with the liquor store or next to?
Through your mayor is adjacent to.
So it's got a separate entrance. Right. I don't see any questions at this time, so I'll go to the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to be heard or present written submissions respecting the variances requested to section 4.37 cannabis retail, conditions of use of the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. And as staff said, these are to reduce the business between two cannabis retail businesses from 300 meters to 145 meters, to reduce the minimum distance between a site containing a school and a cannabis retail business from 300 meters to 145 meters, and to allow cannabis retail to be permitted on a parcel with frontage on Cleveland Avenue. If you'd like to speak to this variance request, after I've confirmed that it's your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and the street that you live on. Each speaker will have a maximum of 5 minutes to address council, and I understand there's people in the lobby who wish to speak to this, so I will give you time to come into the room, so don't worry, I'll make sure everyone has a chance. There's someone here that would like to speak to this variance request. I'll ask again, is there anyone here tonight that would wish to speak to the Development Variance Permit number 151? Nope. All right. I have another question for staff. Are we contemplating changes to our cannabis regulations in the zoning bylaw rewrite that's underway?
Through you, Mayor. Because we've had limited experience with fully licensed retailers in Squamish, our recommendation is to still wait. Although the zoning bylaw update process is a year-long process, and we might be, the closer we get to the end, we might have a little bit more experience. But at this time, everybody's still in process, so our recommendation would be to continue waiting until we have some best practices current best practices essentially indicate keeping the distancing requirements.
Council, any further questions? Council French?
Thank you. I'm curious to know, above and beyond what we have in the report, has the proponent indicated any, bringing any benefit to the community? If this is approved?
Through you, Mayor, we have had some discussions with the applicant. We suggested that if council decided to go with the variance request, that staff would like to recommend that a discussion on some sort of neighborhood benefit or amenity in the immediate neighborhood would be what staff would recommend to council. And we had some discussions about an immediate amenity in the neighborhood, which would be something like electric vehicle charging stations in that parking lot. But my understanding is we didn't get a consensus from the applicant that they would be open to that idea.
So for clarity, would we approve a motion with that stipulation?
There's a few alternative motions that are available to council. One would be to add something in as a condition if council was to approve it. Our recommendation would be, because we don't have a confirmation from the applicant on whether they're offering anything, that would be to refer the variance application back to staff so we can go back and discuss the potential.
Any other questions? Councilor Ford?
Has any work been done to see, given these setbacks from schools and from each other, how many retail spaces would potentially be available for this use, even across the district, to address the demand?
Through you, Mayor, when the original recommendations came in prior to any cannabis retail locations being opened, it was thought there could be a maximum of 13. Depending on where they go up, that number likely is reduced now. And of course, it's dependent on land becoming available where the buffering would impede the use.
So thank you. I read that 13 number, and I thought that was a demand-based number, not based on the sort of the drawing out the different setbacks. So this would, if this applicant was successful, this would be the third. Am I correct in saying this would be the third in downtown, the downtown area?
Through you, Mayor, it would be, there's some
In process.
in processes of movings. It would be the fourth. Two are operating currently, but there are some moving pieces.
Okay, I'll go back to the public. Does anyone wish to speak to Development Variance Permit 151? Come forward. Please state your name and the street you live on.
My name is Fred Hamill, and my permanent residence is 400 Poplar Point Drive, Kelowna, BC. And I
I'll
did.
get you to speak up a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm Fred Hamill, 400 Poplar Point Drive, Kelowna, British Columbia. We did get on a conference call with Jesse and Planner here on last Friday. No, it was 2 Fridays ago. It wasn't last Friday, it was the Friday before. Since then, we put the application in with Max from the energy folks, and we will commit to putting in 2 of the high powered stations. So just wanted to set that record straight.
Thank you. So staff, given that we just heard that, would it still be deferred back to staff to add a condition, or can we add a condition if council so chooses? It says subject to up there.
Yeah, I think we could add a condition if council chooses to proceed now. We could draft
So I was just going to ask council for questions. go to the public, but I see a hand in the public, so I'm going to stay there. So come forward and state your name and the street you live on.
My name is Tristan Mussett. I live on Wilson Crescent, downtown. I also own Sky High Cannabis with my wife on 2nd Avenue. I am not against competition in any way, but when we opened our location, we abided by the bylaws that were in place. We had to find a location that was not within 300 meters of another dispensary. We had to find a location that was not within 300 meters of a school. We had to, and the main one was an address on Cleveland Avenue would have been my first priority. But of course that wasn't available. So I just wanted to reiterate that, I don't know, it seems like if you grant this, you're changing all the existing bylaws. I think one variance was granted earlier in the year, or last year. I didn't oppose that. 3 variances, I oppose it.
Thank you for your comment. Council, any questions? Councilor Race?
Just the staff, I just wanted to be clear whether that's, and I'm not the expert on charging stations, but is that the fast charge or is that the slower charge we're talking about here?
Through you, Mayor, it was the level 3 charge, which is the fast charge.
Fast charge.
Council? Any other questions? We'll vote the public one last time. Is there anyone that wants to speak to this development variance permit? Come forward, state your name and the street that you live on, please.
My name is Phil Salazar. I live on,
Don't touch the mic.
sorry, on Britannia Avenue. I'm a little short. I'm the manager at Squamish Liquor Store, and I guess we can all agree that cannabis retail is coming, whether we like it or not. And I think what the real important issue is that the retailers, the businesses that are granted the licenses are the ones that have the community's safety. That's their best intentions. And I think we've proven that over the past 10 years, operating within the same proximity to an elementary school and a high school with no incidents. And just last year, we had some students that came into the store from House Sound Secondary trying to do a grad challenge, which entailed them to purchase liquor while the other student filmed the transaction happening. Our trained staff was able to refuse service, kick them out of the store, and I immediately phoned House Sound and spoke with the vice principal, and she came to the store. We reviewed the video footage, and she was able to ID the students, and we killed that grad challenge right away. And this is the same level of standard that we will apply to cannabis if we're granted the variance and given the opportunity. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak to this DVP, come forward, say your name and the street you live on, please. Don't touch the microphone if you can help it.
Hi, my name's Lindsay Todd. I live on Wilson Crescent. I'd just like to say that it's clear what the rules are all across Canada as far as proximity to schools. And if Squamish sets the precedent that if we can be closer, I think it's a bad precedent. I think there's distinct lines that we should stick to, and that they shouldn't be allowed to get close to schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak to this DVP?
Hi, I'm Thomasina, 38179 2nd Avenue. I was vaguely listening. I would actually, if this is a marijuana store that's going next to a school, I strongly oppose. My kid goes to school and I don't want that stuff near her, even if it's legal. Yeah, as a parent, I'm voicing that concern.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak to this DVP?
Since we're speaking.
That's what we're here for.
So yeah, Scott
Say your
McQuaid.
name and the street.
Scott McQuaid, The Crescent, Squamish, BC. I'm in support of this variance permit. I've sent a letter in support, which you've all read. I've heard some opposition tonight, and that's the reason I got up to stand up about it. I can see being opposed for certain reasons, but being opposed because you operate a business that you operate a business that for your business reasons to trump the business reasons for someone else doesn't make any sense to me. And I just want to make sure that that's out there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Would anybody else like to speak to this development variance permit? We've got some momentum going. We just got to take it from here.
Well, what the heck?
Okay. It is going to be a fun night. Go ahead, your name and the street you live on.
Daniel Butler, I live at 1794 Garden Place up in Valleycliff. It does seem that if the other businesses, which now there's going to be 3, have all obeyed most or all of the existing bylaws, it seems that it's possible to open a business given the bylaws that are, given the state of the bylaws. So it seems not particularly fair to all the other people who've obeyed the law to then, you know, to make these variances. It just doesn't strike me as a level playing field for the businesses that exist. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions, council? Councilor Penghill?
Can you just remind us, is marijuana retail or production one of our target sectors in our development sector strategy? Do you know offhand?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not 100% positive, but I'm fairly positive that marijuana retail is certainly not one of the target sectors.
Does this retail use have to front Cleveland? So right now, the liquor store has 2 entrances, one to the mall side and one to Cleveland. Is it the same for this cannabis retail location?
As proposed, it would front both. Both.
There would be an entrance both on the mall side and at the front.
Correct, yes.
Okay, last call. Does anybody else want to speak to DVP 151? Okay, seeing none, council. Any final questions? So the options before you, council, are to go with the staff recommendation, which is to not approve the issuance of DVP 151. You could refer DVP 151 back to staff to look at community benefit, or just refer it back for changes, I suppose. Or just simply approve DVP 151 with a condition or without. Put some on the floor, Councilor Reed.
Thank you. I'll move the alternate recommendation with the addition of, subject to provision by the applicant, of 2 level 3 charging stations at a location determined by staff. I'll speak to it for a second.
I'm going to go to Jonas before I get it seconded, because once it's on the floor, staff can't participate.
If I may, I could just recommend to add publicly accessible charging stations, because the charging stations would probably go on the private lot.
Publicly accessible.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Councilor French. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. This is becoming my favorite subject. Just at the end of last term, almost one of our last meetings, we approved variances to allow a retail dispensary in the mall across the street where the Nestor's Shopping Center is. That, as was noted by staff, was about 35 meters when you go from property line to property line away from the nearest school, well under 300 meters, of course, and was also technically on Cleveland Avenue. So I think with respect to the distance from schools, we've already set the precedent that we are not going to consider ourselves bound by 300 meters. I voted in favor of that, and the reason I did at that time, and will again this time, is because when I looked at, and I didn't see it here, but when I looked at the provisions that's required by the province for these retail stores, they're like an armed fort. There's double doors and so forth. You're only allowed so many people inside at one time. It's quite strict, and I'm not sure there's any other retail establishment in the district that is similar to that. And so the idea of kids wandering in, whether from the elementary school or the high school, unnoticed or without regulation or without ID being checked, is practically non-existent. It was, oddly enough, in the same mall as a store that sells guns with little or no restriction on who wanders into the store. It seemed a little bit ironic. So I think, from my perspective, the 300-meter limit between a dispensary and a school is something that is, in the right circumstances, subject to being varied. These circumstances, I think, are suitable, particularly with respect to how these stores are secured against people who are not supposed to be there entering. The second issue is whether or not we would approve something on Cleveland Avenue. And once again, I think we've already stepped past that with the approval of the other license, the other variance in the mall across the street, which also is technically on Cleveland Avenue. And I think, and I'm going back to discussions we had somewhere in the middle of last term, from my perspective, the rationale for keeping them off of Cleveland Avenue was to sort of keep sort of a, what you might call a high street look, or sort of a quaintness to the shopping part of Cleveland Avenue. I am still sort of aligned that way, except that I think starting at Pemberton and going south is more or less the shopping side of Cleveland Avenue, where the small shops are and so forth, and where I think we want to perhaps preserve that character. So I don't have a problem with putting a dispensary in another mall across the street from a mall where we have already approved one of these dispensaries. Third variance is to have a dispensary within 300 meters of another dispensary. That's one of those restrictions that has come along that has just never made any sense to me. Any other business, I don't think we ever legislated, not as much, that kind of a restriction. I grew up in a neighborhood that had 4 banks and an intersection, one in each corner, and they seemed to get along fine. So I don't know the rationale for that. I understand it's the same in a number of other cities in North America, but comments that I made and others made at that meeting that I described at the end of last term, dealing with the other one, is I think now that cannabis has been legalized in this country, there's going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of evolving of these regulations as it becomes more and more acceptable in the community. And I think this is one example of that. So I don't have a problem having this located in that location, relatively close, according to that limit, to other cannabis dispensaries. So I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. Councilor French.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Councilor Race has said, and we'll add that since the previous council brought in the rules that we're currently aware of and currently discussing, a lot has changed in the cannabis world nationally through federal legislation that is yet to come. And The concern around youth access is certainly one I can relate to. Up to children of my own who are in their late teens, and I absolutely wouldn't want young children to have access to a retail outlet like this. And the provincial legislation is set up to really ensure that young people don't have access. The storefront is very nondescript and very plain, and I think there are strong regulations in place to make sure that young people are not getting access to cannabis. So I will be supporting.
Councillor Anderson.
I will also be supporting these variances. I appreciate the co-location with the liquor store. The parking, access, lighting, and good visibility are attributes I think that are actually add up to being a superior location than the variance that was approved last year by the previous council in some ways. I do appreciate the planning department's interest to absorb and monitor evolving best practices. I note that the buffer zones that have been cited here tonight are from larger cities with I think, different contexts. I would not wish to see kind of a cookie-cutter approach that would end up pushing these retail outlets to the edges of the streetscape. I don't think that's what we would want to encourage. I've read carefully the concerns of the schools, Vancouver Coastal Health, and Capilano University. Considering the commitments expressed in the record of the applicant, it seems to me that there are other issues, and I'm particularly in pedestrian movement planning and safety relating to pedestrian movements in this vicinity, that are more serious, in my opinion, as risk factors for children and youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herford.
Thank you. It's really an interesting time, and I acknowledge the ground's really moving on the cannabis regulation, and I appreciate that we have these setbacks, if nothing else, but to trigger the conversations to make sure that inside of these areas we sit together and have a discussion as a community. As my fellow councillors have mentioned, in this particular case, I think this is actually a good fit. As to the concerns of the schools, I think that the pedestrian movements, like Councillor Anderson mentioned, go right across a set of train tracks, which is substantially more dangerous than a well-secured cannabis retail location. I like that it isn't on the fringes of town. Cannabis use isn't something that's in the fringes in Squamish. And this is a nice visible location, applicant with a good track record already, and I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Pengil.
I'm not inclined to support this. One of the things that I've been struggling with since becoming a councillor is, when is a variance appropriate, and when should we think about adjusting our bylaws? And it seems to me the bylaw was, one of the key purposes was to manage the density of these businesses as we learn about the industry and how it'll impact our town. And if we approve this, I'm not sure the point of that bylaw. Like, to me, this is very clearly where we should be talking about amending the bylaw if we want to allow for increased density. And so I think that's the mechanism that for this we should consider. I would also note, I use the fitness center in the building regularly, and there's quite a high traffic of kids going by there. And for me, it's not just an issue of kids going into the store, but it's a statement of our community's values and so on. And it is a normalization. I know society in general is going that way, but I think the only issue isn't just kids going into it, but it's how often and where they see this. Also, I was kind of surprised a few weeks ago when I saw the liquor store had these steel garage doors just blocking out the windows, and there are some nice murals and stuff on it, or pictures, but I found it to be very striking, and it doesn't make you feel safe if a business needs that kind of protection. you know, how you feel about your community in terms of its safety and what that communicates, I think is relevant. And so to put another business that needs to be secured and windows blocked off and that sort of thing, whether or not it's cannabis, I do have some concerns about that as well. So I think at this point I would prefer that we consider density and so on with a bylaw and then possibly.
Thank you, Councilor Pettingill. I won't be supporting this development variance permit, primarily for the variance on Cleveland Avenue. I think that if this was just fronting onto the mall side, where the Save On Foods is, it would be supportable, but I actually don't want to see this kind of storefront facing onto Cleveland Avenue with a big green sign that says cannabis. That's one of the first things that you see when you come into town. I did approve the variance in the other mall because it does not face directly onto Cleveland Avenue. I do think this use is becoming more acceptable, but we are still seeing that public health and our schools are concerned about proximity issues, and I really want to preserve the character of Cleveland Avenue. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Mayor Elliott and Councilor Pettingill opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so we've moved up District of Squamish Camping Bylaw number 2679, 2019. So I'll have staff speak to this report. Ms. Golbeck, are we going to speak to the ticketing bylaws at the same time? Thank you. So we'll do items 2, 3, and 4, and then we'll put in place the unscheduled public attendance following that. There's a couple of seats that have opened up at the front. When you're ready, Ms. Coleman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Natasha Bolbeck. I'm the Senior Director of Community Services for the District of Squamish.
My name is Chris Baker. I'm the bylaw supervisor for the District of Squamish.
We are here to seek 3 readings on the Squamish Camping Bylaw 2679, the camping bylaw, as well as the associated fine schedules. First, I'm going to go through a brief overview of the bylaw and its intention. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the feedback we've received from the community and changes we've made following the April 9th committee of the whole discussion that we had before we'll open it up for some discussion. So what we want is to create a safe and welcoming experience for our community. And to do that, we're of course required to balance competing priorities and be the stewards of our natural assets. Over the last number of years, we have seen a significant increase in the volume of campers camping outside of designated campgrounds as well as within designated campgrounds. And we've also seen the wildfire hazard increase significantly. The objective of this bylaw is to give officers an enforcement tool to assist with the movement of seasonal recreation-driven campers to designated campsites. Designated campsites have facilities like bear bins and fire pits and toilets and the kinds of resources that help to minimize the risk of wildfire and the impact of camping. So our enforcement approach that we took last year to support the sort of management of camping outside of designated campgrounds was that we prioritized locations that were particularly high risk and high impact, and that saw typically poor camping practices. This included the estuary and the spit, downtown, and the Mount Forest Service Road. Those are environmentally sensitive areas, and do see that real density of the recreation-driven seasonal campers. Our enforcement approach, of course, is to seek voluntary compliance and education. That's the first course of action. And having a bylaw that gives us a tool to enforce this is a tool in the tool belt that is part of the options for officers to use in addition to education and compliance. So I'll just give a little bit of a picture of who the campers are that we're talking about. As I mentioned, these are seasonal visitors. We see our best estimates, we see about 2,000 or 3,000 visitors camping outside of designated campgrounds last summer, and that was up from the year before. As I mentioned, these are primarily along Mampcomb Forest Service roads and a couple of other pockets of high density close to our recreation assets. Most of these people are from out of town. We don't have a great way to measure that, but we do typically see a lot of out-of-town plates down the Mampcomb Forest Service Road, and certainly our officer engagement with these folks suggests that they are indeed not Squamish residents for the most part. There are some environmental and social issues, as I've mentioned, arising from both the density and the poor camping practices, typically from this population. That's certainly not to say that this whole population practices camping that has impacts on the environment and the community that are negative. But when we do see major issues, it does tend to typically be these pockets of location which are out-of-town visitors. It's also worth noting, I think, that even if all of these campers engaged in leave no trace camping practices, there would still be an environmental impact just because of the density. 2,000 or 3,000 visitors in a season is more than a relatively small geographical area that is environmentally sensitive can handle, even with the best of intentions. So another group of folks who live in their vans are the Squamish resident van dwellers. These people are typically more diffused throughout the community, typically a lower profile, more self-contained camping, generally know how to camp quite well. Many of these people do live in their vans or vehicles because of economic barriers to housing, and some certainly live in vehicles because of a lifestyle choice. We don't really know how many people this is, but our estimates and discussions with this community could be 50 to 150, somewhere in that neighborhood, vehicle campers in Squamish, many of whom are year-round or close to year-round, living in their vehicles. So we came to council, to committee of the whole on April 9th and had an initial discussion. We got some great feedback from council and some good questions, and we've made a few changes since then. We have removed the Cat Lake exemption area. We're doing some operational investigation. It may at some point warrant a discussion about whether or not it should come back, but at the moment we're certainly not prepared to include that in the bylaw. Because of the issues that came up at council, as well as some other issues. We have made the decision as staff to install facilities, a couple of porta potties up at the Mampcomb FSR exemption area. If nobody's using that area, we can remove them as quickly as we can put them up there. So it seemed like a good risk mitigation action to take. We did do further engagement in private campground, as well as Tourism Squamish. We have an app in development that helps us easily facilitate connection of visitors to campground capacity. So when officers are out doing education and talking to people about where they can be and where they can't be, they can connect the campers with where the capacity is, ideally on the spot or close to that. We also have identified a number of sort of low amenity overflow areas within private campgrounds. So as I mentioned last time we were talking about this issue in council, we did do a bit of an audit about how much capacity there is on a typical summer weekend. We found there was capacity, but we've since found that there's additional capacity that wasn't sort of accounted for in that first round. So, so we see that as an opportunity. We also removed the lower limit of $5,000 for a charge under the Offense Act. And we've kept the maximum in for a judge to have discretion up to $10,000. This, just to be clear, because I know there's been some confusion in the community about this, the ticketing system that allows for that maximum fine of $10,000 is very rarely used, and only under very specific circumstances. And the feedback is that it basically is never used in Squamish. The fine amount that is through the notice enforcement system is set at $100, and this is the system that we use. So that is the fine for violation should the conversations with people in contravention of the bylaw progress to that point. We have received fantastic community engagement on this issue about the challenges and the opportunities presented by this recommended bylaw. And staff have been really appreciative of the variety of perspectives and the vitality of the engagement that we've gotten through this conversation. Concerns about enforcement practices further marginalizing people who are in economic hardship has been a theme, and also about enforcement marginalizing people who are choosing van life as a lifestyle. That's been a theme. Some concerns about losing the sort of character and the feel of being the adventure capital, and that what does it mean to be hardwired for adventure if this is something that that we're practicing as a community. We've also heard significant community support for directing camping to designated campgrounds in order to reduce risk, as we discussed. Based on some of the great community feedback that we've gotten, we'd like council to consider adding a couple of clauses to the bylaw that add some context about the intention of the bylaw. So I won't read it out, it's long, everybody can read. But this is the potential language that council may consider adding. Just look at me when you're ready for me. John's ready, everybody's ready. Oh, that's a little small. So the next steps on this, should council wish to proceed, is we will proceed with officer training and some public education. We're going to launch this app that Tourism Squamish is partnering on with the private campgrounds to facilitate access, as I mentioned, to campgrounds in overflow capacity. And then there's also the second piece of work that is really important, and this is part of what's really emerged from this community dialogue, is that the district we see our role as staff to convene the parties around this conversation about how to support safe and sustainable options for van dwellers. This is about working with the chamber, working with community service groups, Tourism Squamish, and resident van dwellers on talking about what is the workforce housing strategy and how do we really give that energy and life and move it forward. Exploring options that we've seen in other jurisdictions like safe lot programs, for people who are living in their vehicles, that identifying lots or areas within the municipality where they're connected to resources, they're allowed to be there between certain hours or whatever that looks like. Another thing that's come up, and certainly in our working group developing this bylaw, we talked about developing some kind of a permit system that ensures that people are practicing leave no trace camping ethics and guidelines, or there might be some various conditions attached to a permit. So we want to have that conversation with our community and develop those solutions. There may be some resourcing implications to that, of course, as there is with most sticky issues. I do want to also mention, just in closing, that this problem of requiring some safe and sustainable options for van dwellers who are residents of Squamish is not solved by not passing this camping bylaw. And the intention of the bylaw is very specifically to be able to manage recreational seasonal driven camping, and inhibiting officers' ability to have an enforcement tool for that problem does not solve our other issues. So just wanting to add that for context, and I'll stop talking and turn it over to council.
Do we want to speak to the ticketing bylaw at all, Mr. Baker, at this point? Or
What's a
was that all
specific-
covered?
It was the fine amounts that's what's in the MTI and the notice enforcement bylaw amendments.
Do you have a specific question about the ticketing?
No, I just wanted to know whether you wanted to speak to those specifically or whether Ms. Bobek covered those sufficiently in her presentation.
I can briefly mention it just for clarification.
Okay.
So we have 3 different ticketing systems as a municipality that we can use. The notice enforcement regime can be disputed locally here in Squamish, and that will be the method that we use virtually all the time, and then that's the fine schedule that's in the amendment to the bylaw notice system. So that references that $100 fine. The Offense Act is just always referenced in bylaws, and but that system requires what's called a long form charge or a long form information. It goes to provincial court, and then in court the judge sets the fine. So the judge would have the discretion to set the fine wherever they wanted to, from $0 to $10,000, depending on the case. So I mean, often that system would be used in a bylaw, for example, with like a developer clear cutting trees that they weren't supposed to clear cut or something, and then there's a larger economic disincentive for that behavior.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to go to council for any clarifying questions, and then we'll go to the 5 speakers that we've designated. And I'm sorry if I'm sitting here with my arms crossed. I'm freezing, so I'm not angry or stressed. I'm shivering. Any questions, council? Councilor Bird.
Thank you. In our first presentation, there was talk of some no-go zones, is how it was phrased. Could you speak to that and that sort of targeted portion of this?
In terms of enforcement?
In terms of enforcement.
Yes, through the mayor. The areas that we are prioritizing for enforcement are downtown, the Spit and estuary area, and the Manquan Forest Service Road. Those are the areas that typically see environmental sensitivities, the WMA, and the FSR is also an active industrial road, so there tends to be some usage conflicts there, as well as some density of campers. As I mentioned, that density necessarily leads to environmental impacts. So those are the areas that we are going to prioritize enforcement. We don't have unlimited resources in bylaw enforcement, so we have to prioritize. And so that's where we've identified the risk and impact is.
Thank you.
Councilor Pettingill?
So am I correct in that our current laws, I think were passed in 2003, don't allow camping on city streets, city parks, parking lots, and there's a $100 fine currently. So the change here is to crown land that's within district boundaries. Otherwise, it's kind of just what's already there.
That's right, through the mayor. And I'll also add that the permissions policy of the Land Act also currently prohibits crown land camping within a municipality, but there is no associated enforcement tool with that. So it wasn't technically allowed on crown land within the municipality already.
Any other questions? Okay, so we will go in order. Ms. Pigeon, you have 5 minutes to address council.
I'm Thomasina Pigeon. My address is 37768 Secular Avenue, but I live in a van. We have a petition that has gathered 2,762 signatures so far. I have them with me here with comments. Comments go from everything from human rights to lifestyle choices to supporting a culture that Squamish that we have created the backbone of this place. I also have a letter from Pivotal Legal, which is stating that this bylaw does indeed violate Section 7 of the Charter of Rights, which protects the life, liberty, and security of a human being. It also conflicts with BC Human Rights Code, and we also have a survey from we do acknowledge that there is a problem. I think everyone here does acknowledge that. But we understand the tool, that it's a tool for enforcement for a certain person that is behaving bad. But we fear that there will be unintended negative consequences in the current form in terms of the text of the bylaw. It sets a precedent for more restricting bylaws in the future, and it also does not solve the problem at hand. Approving a bylaw like this outlaws someone to sleep in their van, tent, or RV is affront to anyone interested in maintaining basic human rights, period. We asked for an immediate deferral because there's no data. There's a lack of data. There has been zero public consultation with the van community. Helping Hands wasn't even aware of this situation, and also it is not a solution to the problem. Also, pushing this bylaw in all three in one session, it's a very controversial issue. I think it's very not a good idea. Yeah, so the bylaw does not target the bylaw text does not target the problem. It makes no distinguishment between resident and seasonal visitors. It targets people that sleep in a tent, van, or RV. We ask that this bylaw be amended, the text, so that it directly targets problematic behaviors such as garbage and human waste and irresponsible campers, rather than put a blanket ban on sleeping in a tent or vehicle. As mentioned earlier, this bylaw does violate Section 7 of the Charter of Rights, and given Squamish's housing crisis, the lack of affordable housing, and lack of shelters, we cannot push the homeless, and that includes people that live in vehicles and motorhomes due to the margins of the community, which I live in a van. I make $1,000 a month. I cannot afford rent in Squamish. For me, my van life is my choice, but it's also my necessity. I have no other way to live. And my kid goes to school downtown. I'm not going to drive to this area, period. Squamish has a housing and affordability crisis. I know a lot of people that have lived in houses that now live in vehicles because they got kicked out because of rising rent, homelessness, lack of affordable housing, and just being outbidden by city folks. Squamish, also the shelter, Maureen is here for that. She's going to speak about, I hope, the lack of services that we have for the homeless people. I mean, there's definitely been some cold nights for us in the van in the wintertime, and it's not a solution for us. I also don't want to burden the system with being on welfare. I'm self-sufficient in my van. I can sustain it. Some nights it's not that great. It's not a dream life like, some people think, but, there's no way I can afford rent in Squamish. This will negatively impact the quality of lives of people that live in their vehicles here. A lot of us are staff at local businesses. Mentally, to be disturbed, knocked on the door by a bylaw officer, it causes mental stress. It decreases my quality of life. And even when I go to bed, it's a bad bylaw. This bylaw infringes on basic human rights. I think I've made that point. But I just want to say, this land that we stand on belongs to nobody, and it belongs to everybody. I would like to imagine a place that has no borders, that welcomes everyone, while educating them on leave no trace. In New Zealand, they have a really good system that deals with campers, wild campers, which I think that we should be implementing and moving to instead of accepting this bylaw. For you to say that downtown is an environment sensitive area, with all the development that is going on in this town and beyond the town, and to say that van life is an environmental social hazard seems very, I don't mean to be rude, but it does seem very hypocritical. There's a lot of developments going on in this town which are encroaching in green space, wildlife space. I've never seen a bear in my van. I've seen 100 bears downtown. I've seen bears in Ballycliffe. I've seen bears in Crumbit Woods. I've seen cougars, I haven't seen cougars, but you know what I mean. There's been reports of wildlife in all of these areas. Dang it. That's my 5 minutes. And also, not to mention the human rights issue. We have a letter from Pivotal League, which I mentioned. Van life, not everyone fits into a box. I lived in a house. I tried living in a house when C was born, and it's not for me. It makes me crazy in my head. So not everyone fits into this box of houses, and we also consume less, we use less, And my ecological footprint compared to a house is this big compared to a house. You know, like to say that I'm an environmental social hazard is absolutely ridiculous. And if we are going to talk about real climate action, we have 12 years to clean up this planet. And given the developments in this town, and you're going to outlaw sleeping in my vehicle or other people that come to this town that want to enjoy the beautiful Squamish that we have, it just, like, the choice seems obvious. Yeah. I just feel there's a better way to deal with the problematic solutions of campers, large campers, not this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. That, you know, makes Kelsey angry. And also, if you could direct your comments to council, that would be great. And I'll set a timer for you here.
Well, Squamish Community Council, Mayor Elliott, thank you for allowing us to speak. I know that was not the way the agenda normally works, so thank you. Brief note about myself and the community. I've been living here for 2 years. I was a visitor from Vancouver, where I grew up for 12 years. Before that, I should say. I have a master's from UBC in science. I'm happily employed as a craft cocktail bartender here in town. I also have a chronic invisible disability, and I live in my van. So the VRS, or the Vehicle Residents of Squamish Advocacy Group, was formed very recently as a response to these issues that have come up, the proposed bylaw. And one thing that the province of British Columbia does is defines residents as people who live in a location for 6 months or more, except if they're gone on vacation for up to 7 months of any given year. So based on preliminary survey results that we have conducted, and I have forwarded on to council some of those results, the VRS is opposed to the bylaw in its current format. We were not aware of a few of the little changes, and at first glance, for myself personally, and I can't speak for everyone I represent, some of those are encouraging, and I'm curious to look into that in more depth. But before the presentation tonight, we view that it fails to explicitly ensure that the long-term residents that are not contributing to the problematic behaviors deemed unsustainable by the district. It will turn otherwise law-abiding and upstanding members of your constituency into outlaws, simply for how and where they go to sleep at night. These people make your food, they teach your kids, they build your homes, consult for bodies of government, Squamish Council included, conduct scientific analysis, and love this community as much as you do. And yes, I personally know people that fit each of those examples I mentioned. There are also bad actors among any community. So that is a problem for us, and it's a problem of optics. But we want to make sure that we know that 80% of people who live here 7 months or more of the year, from the preliminary results, not a complete survey yet, believe that there is a problem that needs to be addressed. We need a community-based solution for the problem, and some of the ideas mentioned by the staff about issues around ideas such as permitting, those are excellent solutions, and I think they need to be pursued further, and we hope that council recommends that. Mind if I get a quick time check?
You've got 1 minute and 30 seconds.
30 seconds, thank you. Well, I'm just going to read for the record and for the people in the audience some of the preliminary results from the survey. As of Saturday afternoon, that was 5.5 days of the survey being available. There were 169 respondents. 62% of those, which is 104 people, self-identify as residents of Squamish. For those that lived 7+ months of the year here, 76 plan to live, 76 plan to live 7+ months of the year. 65 of those, which is 86%, are employed locally or are self-employed and working here. 89%, so 68 of the 76 people oppose the bylaw in its form before its presentation today. And lastly, I just want to say that 82% of those people support the formation of the vehicle residents of Squamish because there was a lack of coherent voice amongst the group, and we need representation, and we would like to continue to engage with the district to find proper solutions for things going forward. So we hope you consider those items, and thank you for your time.
Well done.
Thank you for an opportunity to speak. My name is Nathan Kukathis. I live on 3rd Avenue, and I'm a business owner in Squamish. And I live in a house. I also own 4 businesses, and I also am an investor in a business overseas. And I represent the businesses of Squamish and stand here...
Just make sure you address council.
Oh, thank you. Stand here with a concern for the future of our economy. To give you a small snapshot of my background, I moved here 18 years ago. At that point, I did live in a van. And the businesses that I've built are primarily in the product design industry. I've worked for large companies in Vancouver, including Arc'teryx, and commuted this highway a lot. And right now, this bylaw compromises the future economy of Squamish. What we've heard tonight is that it will be about 3,000 people per year that are visiting Squamish as tourists, sleeping in their vehicle. I'd be curious to know where those 3,000 people are now going to go. I've spoken to businesses including Sea to Sky Cable Cam, Real Water Productions, Free Flow Plumbing, Cordy Geosciences, Climb On Store, Altus Rock Guides, 8 other rock guides that are individuals, Ground Up Climbing Gym, Zephyr Cafe, Ilaho Publishing, Black Sheep Gear Reviews, Corsa, Leon Lebanist, freelance designers, construction workers and painters, real estate agents, artists, jewelers, musicians, music teachers, some property developers, and people who work in new developments of products and technologies. Each of these peoples have expressed that this could have impact, and in some cases will have detrimental impact to their business. Some of these businesses rely on the current status for their employees to have places to live. Some of these businesses rely on direct revenue from tourism that comes. In the case of my business, we design products for the outdoors, for living here in Squamish and being a part of this community. This just doesn't make sense. I mean, this bylaw is targeting people sleeping in vehicles, but it says that that's to solve a problem to do with litter and dumping. Well, if that's the problem, then we need to look at that and address this. Pushing this through in a single hearing doesn't honor the interests of the diverse community we have here in Squamish. And so I have the following requests. First, that this is not pushed through in a single hearing, that this has to go through 3 separate hearings. In doing so, that we have an opportunity as the public of Squamish to collaborate and develop solutions that would be inclusive and sensitive to the diverse needs and interests of this community. Solutions that we can pull from all places around the world to garner what has been successful and what hasn't. You know, we've lived in this town, or some of us have lived here for 30, 40 years with van life culture. And to consider that overnight it's a necessity to eradicate this seems like a drastic solution. And so I believe that we need to take a necessary amount of time to do thorough research and investigate what are the direct impacts and what are the indirect impacts so that we can develop solutions that will not necessarily compromise the future of Squamish, but that will create a space that everybody can love and enjoy. In addition to these concerns that I've raised, Several other considerations that I'd like to share tonight are that it would be a really sad day if somebody loses somebody on the highway because nobody could stop and rest. It would be a really sad day if somebody drives home drunk because they didn't think that they could just sleep the night in their vehicle. These are serious impacts, and these are not so far being considered. I would request that this type of thing be also included in the analysis of what kind of impact is this going to have on our community. We can't afford to lose one person because a bylaw was written in haste.
This is interesting.
Thank you.
Mr. Lesage, you have 5 minutes. When you get to the podium, please address council.
Yes. Mayor, am I able to delegate any remaining time?
No, council's approved the 5 speakers on our list, so
Okay.
that's up to you.
So I'm Peter Lesage. I live on 3rd Avenue. I've been camping in BC several 100,000 days, 38 years, 3 months. And I have never had a problem. I camp self-contained. I camp appropriately. So I think one of the easiest solutions for government to do is ban something. You know, any idiot can kick in a barn door and criticize it, but it takes a craftsman to build a barn door. And this is fundamental to BC. Camping in BC is like telling somebody not to breathe. I mean, we've done it since time immemorial. And I just fundamentally don't think that I should be criminalized because I want to camp on the spit and have a coffee. There's already, I believe that council should stay in its lane. The provincial government has probably 200 laws now. So if I litter on the spit, I can be fined already. There's a conservation officer that can come and he can get it. If I spill my toilet tank, he can come and find me and clean it up. So we already have this solution. The province already gave us this punitive criminal solution to these things. What I look for local council is some positive solutions. I want to see you guys build a barn door. Be craftsmen. We have 55 acres of unused parkland down the street here that's been sitting vacant for 13 years. It's got hydro. It's got sewer. Put some gravel down. Let people camp there in their car. Charge them $3. It's there. We have the 55 community center parking lot, been vacant for 10 years. It's got sewer. It's got hydro. People could camp there. It's done. We've got the former MTO, Ministry of Transportation, right across from the Mamcam Road. It's 12 acres. Let people camp there. We've got a greened area across from the hotel. You could put in sewers for no money. Hydro's there. Let them camp there, collect the garbage. That's what I expect local council to do. I expect local council to pick up my garbage, to provide sewage. We don't have a public pump out station in Squamish. Don't have it. Those are the things that solve problems. I mean, I've camped here for over 13 years. I got pushed out of Whistler for the same reasons. It didn't solve the problem. Other people have mentioned. All it did is exacerbate it. Everybody left Whistler, and now they're bringing in import workers because they can't, find people. So, rather than criminalize, which is the easy solution, which now I become a criminalized. I mean, I've been camping here for 13 years. I've never put garbage, and if I do put garbage, there's measures, right? Like, what is so wrong? We have 800 people coming to the spit that used to, probably 100 of them used to camp. There's no environmental degradation of the spit as a result of that. We've been camping since 1979.
right? The only environmental contamination at the spit is a gigantic oil spill. Well, that wasn't me. I've only got 5 liters, right? That was a big oil tanker. So I think we're hitting this with a massive sledgehammer when all it needs is a little bit of fine-tuning and some alternative solutions. Like, I'll gladly pay $3, but, you know, we have 800 people come to the spit on a weekend, and now they're driving their SUVs to Vancouver and Whistler. What's the environmental impact of that? Whereas if we had a campsite that was closed, like Site A would have been a perfect campsite, right? It's right across, we could have cut the spit, Site A would have held 200 people, it already had sewer, it was already contaminated. Like, how do you contaminate a contaminated site? Like, is my oil going to contaminate your oceanfront development
You've got 30
anymore?
seconds, Mr. Lesage.
So, I mean, let's get real here. I mean, let's criminalize the criminals, not the campers. Camping to BC is like breathing. So if you're going to tell me I can't camp, you might as well tell me I can't breathe. Thanks.
I didn't want to be the last word.
You have 5 minutes, and just address council, please.
Yes. I didn't want to be the last word. I wanted to address something that Thomasina said about us not, Helping Hands not being consulted. I didn't say that. There has been an ongoing conversation, and it is recently looking at it further and talking to more people, both our participants and staff, and getting a different, gathering different perspectives that I came tonight to say that I am opposed. I'm opposed because there's a summit here, and I think we need to bring the summit together and really talk about solutions. I'm opposed because the problem is that there's a possibility for criminalization or acting on this bylaw indiscriminately, even though I know that the intention is to be discriminate. I know that the intention is to really target certain types of behavior, but I think we need to openly talk about what that behavior is and put that behavior somewhere rather than having a blanket ban or bylaw, which depends on the officer that is enacting or doing the work. So I am opposed because I think there's a conversation that needs to be had, and I don't think that conversation has fully taken place. It has begun, and I really applaud the folks who have come together today to talk about their rights and their liberty. I also represent many people who camp, both with good behavior and bad behavior, camping behaviors. And I think, I feel that we are, there is a possibility as time goes on of marginalizing these people even more. The issue is, for many, and I can't speak for everybody here, but the issue is affordable housing. That's one of the biggest issues that we face, and I think we have to deal with that before, making people who have no other resources or who, have barriers in one way or another, making them feel like they are not included in this community, and that their rights and their liberty are not important. So that's it. That's my opposition. I feel that there's a bigger conversation. There's more conversation, and I did not realize when discussing it earlier that it was first, second, and third reading. I think that's a mistake. I think it's clear that more consultation needs to happen. Thank you.
And I realize there's lots of people here tonight, so we did the clapping through the people speaking, I'm fine with that. But now we're going to go back to council and staff, and now I'd like to sort of come back to the respectful environment, because there may be different viewpoints that are going to be expressed, and we need to respect all viewpoints here in this chamber. So I'll ask people to keep their clapping or hooting and hollering to themselves at this point. So council, any questions for staff after hearing representations from the public and hearing staff's presentation? Councilor Pettingill.
So just given the comments, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around, just if you can express crystal clearly if, because, you know, maybe we decline to move this, or maybe we get to third reading. In any case, it doesn't get passed tonight, and maybe it goes no further at all. So when we all leave here tonight, where is it legal to camp in Squamish, and where is it not legal to camp in Squamish when we all leave here tonight, regardless of what we do next tonight?
What's the current state?
Yes.
So, depends what you mean by legal, I guess. So the permissions policy of the Land Act allows people to camp for free for up to 14 days on Crown land. That is restricted within a municipality. You are not allowed to camp on Crown land in a municipality per the Land Act permission policy section 6.2.1. We don't have, as I mentioned, an enforcement tool. So in a sense, it's legal because we have no way of enforcing that, but it is not allowed by the Land Act that permits these activities outside of the boundaries of the municipality. It is, of course, allowed to camp in designated campgrounds. We have many of those in Squamish. So does that answer your question?
And then like city streets, city parks, and that kind of thing at this point in time?
So our traffic bylaw prohibits sleeping in your vehicle on municipal road currently.
Is that being good for now, Councilor Pettingill? Yeah. Other questions? Councilor Race.
Just to clarify, because the comment came out from one of the speakers, what's before us is three readings of the bylaw tonight, but that does not pass it, I don't believe. It still requires fourth reading, which would be a separate vote. Am I correct in saying that?
So 3 readings tonight and then adoption at a separate meeting.
Councilor Pettingill.
With our zoning rules, if someone wanted to open, you know, I understand there's generally capacity still at the public and private sites in Squamish. If people wanted to open an additional campsite, campgrounds within Squamish, does our zoning bylaws allow for that, or would that require also some zoning changes?
Who are you looking for?
Jonas. I'm not sure I can answer that with confidence. I'll have to get back to that.
Many people spoke tonight about the lack of specificity in this bylaw, that it would target everyone. Do you feel that the language in the bylaw as it stands right now directs it at the problem behaviors, or do you feel that we could make some changes?
I think the way it's written right now, because yeah, the bylaws are generally written to prevent loopholes, and then when a bylaw officer is addressing a situation, they can then use their discretion whether or not, you know, a ticket is used or what approach is taken. But to speak specifically to the littering, like if we were to just have if that's the problem, to just have a ticket for that. I mean, generally, when you go to a campsite that's you know, being continually used, and then you know, as soon as it's vacated, another group shows up, there will be a bunch of garbage that continues to accumulate, and yet no one ever takes responsibility for it. So dealing more directly with just the areas that people can camp, and directing people to areas where the garbage is cleaned up by campground staff, and garbage facilities are easier to find. Like bear-proof garbages are close to, within 5 campsites away. That's, an easier way to deal with the garbage issue.
Can I add a comment to that? Some of the speakers had the very good point that we've turned around at the working group level as well about this issue, that if it's the problem behaviors that are the problem, which is not 100% true, but in some ways that is true. I mean, the density in itself, as I mentioned, is also a problem. But the problem behaviors, why don't we just target the behaviors? And the reason being that the enforceability of that is a real challenge, because it's hard to prove who left all that garbage there. Or, we can't just have a stakeout and wait for somebody to have a, to practice bad camping practices. It's
The garbage can.
I ask you to keep your comments to yourself, please, and let staff speak to the question.
So the solution that the working group arrived at, which is surely there are no perfect solutions, is that camping is safest and easiest to have low impacts and to minimize risk by being in designated campgrounds where facilities exist.
This is in the foyer.
Oh, Jonas, do you want to come in? There's a question that needed a planner's view. Maybe if you stood at the podium?
Maybe I'll go.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Don't touch the microphone.
I won't.
Okay. Councillor Pettingill, you want to repeat your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if someone, private landowner, wanted to open a new campsite, does our zoning currently allow that, or would some rezoning be required? Or are there any areas that would allow new campsites?
Through you, Mayor, yes, there are certain zones that allow camping in the district, and generally whenever we get inquiries about camping, staff and our policy is supportive, would be supportive of property in the right location would require a rezoning, because we know we're a growing destination. But not every property allows it. Certain properties do.
And then a somewhat related question: if someone has a home and they have a big driveway, and they allow for camper vans to park there for a short time, a long time, can they charge for that? Do we have rules around that kind of thing on private property?
Airbnb driveways?
So I believe that would qualify as camping. And so if you're on a residential property, the primary use is residential use. I think camping is not the same thing in zoning terms.
So it would not be generally allowed, sort of, it would be complaints based, but sort of, if people complain there's some long-term situation, that would not really be okay with our current rules.
Yes. Through you, Mayor. It is complaints based in terms of zoning complaints and how we respond to them. It's not very common. I can't recall that we've received such a complaint in recent years. So that's essentially how we enforce it. If somebody was to complain, we would have to go and investigate and go from there.
Any other questions, Council? Councillor Anderson?
Yes, staff earlier presented a couple of clauses that were intended to be added to the bylaw. I just wondered if I could get some clarification on the status of those clauses. Are they in the bylaw before us? If I could just clarify.
They are not, but if you'd like, we can let them in.
You would have to move a motion that includes those whereas clauses. They currently are not in the bylaw.
Thank you.
It is a suggestion of staff. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. This is a very complex issue, and as we all can, all the speakers spoke to tonight, and I appreciate the proposed additions here of these whereases to help direct the the policy. And I really liked I think it was your next slide that had next steps. My questions are going to be about how we capture this, because I don't think that any one piece or someone here is going to move something that captures the complexity of the issue. So how do we capture these next steps and make sure that that we keep moving forward and working on this issue as a community? So are there things in the work plan that capture those bullet points, or is there?
Sorry, through the mayor, I know that economic development has been having many conversations about a workforce housing strategy, as has Gary Buxton in building and planning. I think that there is opportunity to give that, as I said, a little bit more energy and potentially attention, given this issue bubbling to the surface so significantly, and in the context of the proposed bylaw. Exploring these other options is not currently in the work plan, but we can reprioritize if council directs us to do that soon.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Herford?
I thought a lot of the suggestions that we received, and I did my best to get through all the correspondence, but there was a lot. But there was I really like the permitting and the safe lot program to make sure that people that are living in their vehicles and that are locals have a safe way to do that, and we know, and a way that we can recognize that's part of the culture here. So I'd really like to voice our support for working towards some sort of permitting, parking, licensing. I don't know what that solution is, so I want to make sure we don't lose that part of the discussion that we've had over the last few days. And but yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out how we take steps forward through this that gets to some end game where through 5 different steps we're at a better place than we are today. So.
Did you want to speak to Councillor Herford's comments?
If I may, good mayor. I really appreciate all of the energy that we have here in the room, and I think maybe a way to frame, the idea that you're getting at is this bylaw intends to get people to designated campgrounds, and we have a list of campgrounds and with varying different sort of levels of accessibility and locations and everything else. But what I'm sensing is that the population that we have here with us today in the municipal hall doesn't see that one of those list of options suits them, and so I think potentially it would be great to hear a new proposal from this community as far as creating some kind of designated space, which could look like those things that you suggest. But I think that's what we're looking for as the next step, is to define designated space.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Race.
Thank you. It's a related question. If we did want to pursue, I guess it's the 3rd bullet point, working with community service groups, etc. We could pass a resolution directing staff to do that, separate from consideration of the other issue before us. And I just wondered if staff wanted to comment on that, if we chose as a separate motion to direct staff to do that and conduct that consultation and look for those solutions with the stakeholders.
That would be fantastic. I do see these as 2 separate issues requiring separate approaches. And this is as has been mentioned, a very complicated issue that requires a lot of voices at the table to figure out the right policy or infrastructure or whatever it is solution, especially those who are most affected by it. Staff do see that as a separate issue from the camping bylaw and the recreational seasonal camping issue. So, yeah, that would be positive.
Councilor French?
Thank you. I got start with an observation and then I have a question. On Sunday, I was out for a run and I ran by the Mancomb River camping area. It looked to me like there was one camper in that facility, which says to me that that facility is apparently not ideal for the community that is here with us today, car campers and van lifers. Which kind of ties back to Councillor Pettingill's question about zoning for new campgrounds. I don't think that's the solution to create new commercial camp facilities. And I note that on May 17th, on Friday, we heard from Dave Seldom, the district manager, Sea to Sky Natural Resource District with the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development. Somehow, he and his team weren't included in our initial work on this bylaw. And
I'm going to just make sure that that is that true?
No, they've been working closely with us.
okay, so separate from that, one of the things that he notes in his correspondence is a suggestion that we look into clean energy recreation funding as a source of funding around this issue. Is that something we could potentially apply for? Do you know about this fund? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I don't know much about that fund in particular, but I saw that also, and I think that's great, and we'll certainly pursue that opportunity. We're also committed to working with FLNRO in developing more of a comprehensive rec management strategy for the region. That might be a longer term process, but district staff are very keen on having a systemic longer term solution to this. So they've invited us to participate in that, and that probably some of that will involve seeking resources from third parties, and we're happy to be involved in that.
Any other questions, Council? I would like to move first reading of the bylaw. And the reason I want to do that is to keep something moving forward. But the reason I only want to move first reading is because I think there's additional consultation that needs to happen with the community here tonight that helps us craft the whereas clauses to target specific groups or behavior to make sure that people are comfortable with that. I think doing a stepwise process based on the feedback we've had is important. And if that passes, then I would put forward a motion which is to engage more broadly, because what we've discovered here tonight is a form of housing that hasn't been contemplated in our affordable housing strategy. You know, we want to build housing for the whole housing spectrum, and this is a whole group of people that to this point have been invisible in that discussion. But at the same time, we get complaints from residents about people in their vans. Now, whether those are seasonal or whether those are people living here full time, we need to balance the interests of both, but I think there's a broader discussion. So my first motion is to move first reading of the bylaw and direct staff to engage with the community who's provided feedback to get the wording of the bylaw to a place where there's more comfort with it.
For clarification, with or without the whereas clauses?
I will include the whereas clauses, but they're also subject to feedback. Seconded by Councilor Reyes. Any discussion? Councilor French.
I think this is a great solution. Thank you for your leadership. We heard some words tonight that really resonated for me. Collaboration from Mr. Kukathas. I think that's what's called for in this situation. And Mr. West pointed out there's a lack of coherent, or there has been in the past, a lack of coherent voice from the community that's with us here tonight. And we have that voice now. And I think that collaboration that maybe was missing earlier is now here. So I support the motion.
Any other comments? Councilor Rice? And then Councilor Hurford?
Thank you. And I think this is a good solution. I was a little bit nervous about going all the way to third reading in one shot. Usually, similar to a zoning bylaw where you very often take steps and sometimes amend it as the thing goes along. And so I think that's a good way to do it. There's a couple of comments made though, and I just wanted to clarify. From my perspective, as one of the speakers stated, this is a problem that needs addressing. We have wildfire issues, whether we like them or not. Our summers are tinder dry these days. We've seen what happens in other communities that are threatened by wildfires. We just spent the first part of this afternoon talking about mass evacuation plans in the case of disasters like that. It is our reality, and we have to take kind of drastic steps sometimes to minimize and eliminate that threat. And unfortunately for some people, unlawful camping gives them sort of a bit of a license to go into the woods and do things that they shouldn't do and cause that threat to our community. We also are very sensitive to wildlife attractants. People that live in houses and apartments and townhouses and condos are fined regularly for violating that. We don't want wildlife drawn into our community where they tend to get slaughtered. That's not our goal at all, and we have taken very significant steps in this community to control it. And that is also going to be the burden of people who are living in vans in our community. They have to share that burden. So we have these issues, and for people that step outside those issues, I think this was a good tool, is a good tool, and is something we can work on going forward. It is not a criminal offense. It is an offense more like a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. You don't get a criminal record from doing this, so don't overstate the problem. You can get ticketed, but you're not going to end up in jail. I think I'm supportive of the second part because I think obviously this motion isn't on the table yet, but I'll speak to it now anyway while I'm talking. But I think this is a necessary thing going forward because there are two separate issues here. The other is the housing issue. And to put the two of them together as one bylaw or try to do that, that's not where we're going. I think we have to deal with the enforcement. We have to make sure that people follow our rules just like they do if they're living in a house. But we also have to find housing for people in our community. Technically, it's not even a municipal responsibility, it's a provincial responsibility. But the reality is we have taken the lead on a number of different projects in our community for affordable housing, sub-market housing, and this is another part of housing, workforce housing. And so it is something we will have to deal with going forward. So I am supportive of this and the next resolution.
Okay, I've got Councilor Hurford, then Councilor Anderson, and then Councilor Pettengill.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this this reading, but with the knowledge that when it gets to third reading or the adoption phase, I expect it to look different than it does today. This is to continue working on this solution and with everyone with everyone involved. So I think we've got already. The changes that have come forward have been constructive, and I look forward to seeing what happens as we continue to engage. And it is a multi-layered challenge. We want to protect our community. We need to accommodate people that have made the lifestyle choice to live in their vehicles, and those also that choice has sort of been made for them by the economic reasons and the housing challenges that we have. So, and I look forward to seeing what those solutions are. And I'll be supporting this with the notion that we still have a lot of work to do to get us over the line with further regulating this. So,
Councilor Anderson?
Yes, I'm going to be supporting this proposed first reading as well. I'd like, however, to touch on the issue of public consultation, which has come up in a number of letters that have been addressed to Council. Prior to joining council myself, I represented Squamish streamkeepers and forest licensees on the working group concerned with unauthorized camping, which was taking place under the leadership of our staff member Natasha Goldbeck throughout 2018. I just wanted to affirm the efforts that were made to carefully define our goals, to be sure that the people who needed to be reached out to and included were doing so. And in defining the goals, perhaps that could have been, we've learned some things along the way and tonight as well. But the suggested clauses that we're discussing tonight, in fact, were all along part of the philosophy of that working group. To quote from the bylaw, education and voluntary compliance will be prioritized, and also a tool to add to the suite of options. These were the philosophy of the working group from the beginning, and I continue to be satisfied that they're the approaches that we need. We do need this tool. Streamkeepers have been involved a lot in cleaning up after campers in areas where really it's not appropriate for camping in that manner. The focus was visitors and seasonal, as has also been addressed in the staff presentation. We've learned a lot in the way of constructive suggestions from the letters, registry, permitting, safe lot programs, and most of all, we've learned that you're organizing yourselves, those of you who are in the audience, part of the Van living community, and you can be assured that consultation will continue to happen with you, whatever comes out of these bylaw initiatives.
Councillor Anderson, Councillor Pengel.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I will be supporting the motion. A couple thoughts. As many people have mentioned, this is a really complex issue, and I think we will probably go through a few iterations of bylaws. I don't see us coming up with an ideal bylaw in a few weeks or months, and I think we'll need some interim measures, which will be ones that we will definitely be able to improve on. But I think, as acknowledged, Squamish is an attractive place. We are sort of at the edges of our capacity to handle things, camping and so on well, and so we do need to find some way to manage that in the interim, and it may be a little crude. Very happy that we're willing to work to constantly improve that, but I think that's a bit of the context we're working in. I look forward to having some more discussions. There's just been an avalanche of correspondence, which is great. I'm hoping to sit down with a few people to dig into some of this further. I think there are some pieces of the discussion that are still missing for important context. So I am looking forward to those discussions, and we can sort of get to where we need to go eventually and accept there may be a few bumps in the road along the way.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I'd now like to move a motion that,
Just on process, is that all three of them, or is that dealing with them separately?
One at a time.
One at a
Bylaws
time.
can only be one at a time. So
Okay.
that's you can delay the ticketing, because if you end up, you can move it to third reading, but if you can't adopt it because there's nothing to enforce, no good bylaw to enforce. So you can delay bringing those ones forward.
we'll delay readings on the ticketing authority. Okay. Until we bring those back. Council?
Do you need a motion for that?
No. So I'd like to move a motion that staff continue to engage with community service groups, Chamber of Commerce, Tourism Squamish, and the Squamish resident van dwellers, although I think you have an association name now. On systems to support safe and sustainable options for van life in our community. And I think is that clear enough?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor French. I'll speak to it. One of the things I love about Squamish is that our community does get engaged in the debate. There's nothing better for a council than to get feedback. It's kind of sad when we sit in here and no one wants to talk to us. So I know people feel passionately about this issue, and our staff are solutions focused in the same way that council is also trying to be solutions focused. So this is definitely highlighted an area that's been missing in the conversation. And I think it's a conversation that should happen. But we also, like I said, need a tool to manage some of the high-risk activities that are happening. Council sat this afternoon and realized, sitting there realizing that it would be my signature that would evacuate this whole community because someone started a wildfire. So we have some high-risk behavior we need to take care of. We have residents who are choosing a type of housing that we also need to take care of. And that's what this second conversation is about, is how do we do that in a way that reduces potential community conflict, supports local businesses, and enables people to make a housing choice that makes sense to them within our community. So that's why I'm moving this motion forward. Would you like to comment, Councilor?
Yeah, thank you. So we've had a lot of correspondence over the last couple of days on this issue, and all of it has been passionate, which is great. And most of it has been from the side of people who are asking us not to move ahead with the bylaws that were proposed. Who we haven't heard from, for the most part, over the last couple of days, is people who are negatively impacted by campers who are not following the no-trace methods of camping. And I have heard personally from some people who are negatively impacted, and I agree, we do need to move forward with some tools that do allow us to deal with the people who are having negative impacts on the environment and are putting us at risk of wildfire. So with that, I'll just reiterate that I support the motion that's now on us.
Councilor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion. I think this is a way that this captures the spirit of the evening, and really I expect we got 3 bullet points there: the workforce housing strategy, explore options, and maybe resourcing implications. I expect there to be, even just going through the correspondence we received the last few days, there's probably 10 more bullet points that could be up there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can work those into the final camping bylaw, and also other pieces of policy that we'll be working on going forward, so that we're taking this into consideration with all the many decisions that we do throughout our days here in council. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Pengill.
I will support the motion, but I would like to request that at some point we can have a bit of a discussion in terms of a little bit more precise the scope of this and where this fits in, because we don't have staff waiting for something to do, and so this will be pushing other things lower down on the list, and I would like some understanding of, like I said, this is a complex issue, and the real solution may take several years, so which pieces are we hoping to bite off, how soon? I think that would be an important discussion for us to have.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you, staff. Unless you want to stay and learn about business park bylaws, zoning, and our floodplain control bylaw, you're welcome to go home. Council will take a 5-minute recess. Welcome back to the regular business meeting for May 21st. We are now on item 8A1, District of Squamish zoning bylaw, number 2663, 2019. This is our business park update. I will turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator, and this is Jesse Fletcher, Planner of Community Planning. We're here tonight to present a zoning bylaw amendment to preserve lands for industrial uses in the business park for consideration of first and second reading.
Oops, sorry, that's your name. Sorry, I was speaking.
Another mayor in the lobby.
Okay. So the business park update is one of 2 strategic updates to the zoning bylaw that staff are undertaking outside of the comprehensive zoning bylaw update. Staff were directed to undertake this update at the February 12th Committee of the Whole meeting. The amendments presented tonight were first discussed at the April 23rd, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. Business Park Update Bylaw 2663 seeks to temporarily curb the growing commercialization of industrial zone parcels in the Sea to Sky Business Park. Based on feedback from the Committee of the Whole on April 23rd, staff have drafted a bylaw that establishes the I-11 Business Park Industrial Zone. This zone will apply to the majority of parcels in the business park that are currently zoned I-1. These changes seek to address the growing issues that have been observed in the Sea to Sky Business Park. There have been a rapid increase in commercialized tenants in the Sea to Sky Business Park in recent years, primarily with fitness centers and restaurant uses. This has led to a rise of many issues, including increased lease rates. Staff have come to understand that buildings that are suitable to some commercial uses are associated with higher lease rates than areas where developments are strictly intended for light industrial uses. Zoning that supports commercial activities may be driving lease rates up out of reach for some industrial tenants. Incompatibility of industrial and commercial uses due to significant fire separation requirements in the BC Building Code. Commercial uses such as fitness centers and or restaurants require significantly more parking than light industrial uses, as you can see from this table. Given that the business park is not within a walkable distance from most residential neighborhoods and lacks an active transportation infrastructure, many customers drive to these commercial businesses, further reinforcing this issue. As commercial tenancies start occurring in these areas, the storage and laydown space tends to be replaced with the required additional parking. On the other hand, anticipating commercial uses in these locations and providing the appropriate number of parking spaces results in a higher proportion of land being allocated to parking, as opposed to a scenario where properties are exclusively used for light industrial land uses and more land can be allocated to employment space. The majority of the parcels in the Sea to Sky Business Park are zoned light industrial, I-1, which permits a range of industrial uses, but also permits restaurant up to 50 seats and fitness center. This bylaw amendment creates the I-11 Business Park Industrial Zone and rezones all parcels zoned I-1 in the business park to I-11. This I-1 zone does not permit restaurant or fitness center outright, but does specifically spot zone all of the parcels where the use is planned or is occurring. On the figure above, the hatched parcels represent the parcels currently zoned I-1, which will be rezoned to I-11. Additionally, the new I-11 zone will restrict automobile-oriented commercial and building supply outlet uses in the area shown above. The uses will be permitted to occur on parcels where an active business license is currently held. Staff have also removed the definition of automobile repair shop and amended the definitions of automobile-oriented commercial and motor vehicle repair and service shop to reduce redundancy and better clarify the difference between uses. The I-11 zone will also increase the maximum permitted height from 10.68 meters, 35 feet, to 15 meters, 49 feet. This change has not previously been discussed with this council. Staff are recommending this change to reduce the number of height-related variances in the business park, which are often sought to offset the loss of height due to the flood construction level, and to achieve more substantial height on the second story, which helps create better employment space. This height increase is supported by official community plan policy, and the 15-meter height was determined by reviewing industrial areas throughout Metro Vancouver.
So a small change has been made to the I-1 zone, which is to remove the permitted use drive-through, which was previously only permitted on one site, which will now be zoned I-11. This use will still be permitted at this location in I-11. Staff are recommending amending the I-4 zone used goods industrial, which applies to the parcels highlighted in yellow on the screen. Permitted uses in the I-4 zone currently refer to the uses that are permitted in the I-1 zone. To amend this, staff have listed the permitted uses in the I-11 zone within the I-4 zone. Cafe and fitness center are spot zoned on the two properties that are currently developing these uses, as shown on the map with the stars above. The amendments also include changes to the I-8 zone as directed by council. In this zone, restaurant and fitness center uses will only be permitted on parcels where the use is currently occurring or is under active development. No new restaurants or fitness centers would be permitted on these parcels, but those that exist or have applied for a business license have been spot zoned and would be permitted to continue in perpetuity. Any new gyms or restaurants would be required to seek a zoning amendment if they wish to locate in this zone. This amendment also seeks to make a few amendments to the I-2 rail marshalling zone, including to explicitly prohibit cannabis production and to increase the maximum permitted height for principal buildings from 10.68 meters to 25 meters. to accommodate height-intensive industrial buildings. This height was obtained by reviewing heights in medium industrial areas throughout Metro Vancouver. Staff are also proposing that a 30-meter setback be applied to adjacent properties with a residential use. Above is an approximate extent of the 30-meter setback from the adjacent residential use, which would only apply to buildings that exceed a height of 10.68 meters. The actual placement of a large building would likely be more than that due to the informal driveway that extends along the 30-meter setback. The residential community at this location benefits from significant landscaping on their site. Any building that did go in would be subject to both the zoning bylaw and DP guidelines, which do require screening between incompatible uses. Staff recommend that council approve first and second reading of bylaw amendment number 2663/2019, and that a public hearing be scheduled for June 18th at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Questions of clarification, council? Councilor Anderson?
Yes, just reading from your report, the height that you are recommended to increase the maximum permitted height was obtained by reviewing height in medium industrial areas throughout Metro Vancouver. I was unaware that the term medium industrial as applied in zoning bylaws was common elsewhere. Is there a particular type of zone or label for the zone where you derive that information? Or is there, in fact, a medium industrial zone in the city of Vancouver or other neighboring municipalities?
Through you, Mayor, in the city of Vancouver, there was a medium industrial zone. I can't remember the exact terminology throughout the various zones that were reviewed, but there was varying levels of height depending on the industrial zone and what were the adjacent land uses to that zone. And this kind of, I can't remember if it was specifically medium industrial, but there was a distinction between height and the associated neighboring land uses. And you'd see that a higher height was permitted when residential uses were further away from these industrial zones.
I see.
Continue.
Could you characterize the type of building, the function of the buildings that were at that height that you were recommending? Warehousing?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, yes, warehousing and other typical kind of more medium, less light industrial uses. The lighter industrial kind of had a lower height, and warehousing and more kind of moving towards heavier industrial. Obviously, there wasn't always a medium industrial definition, but that just felt kind of an adequate way to describe the uses that were occurring in those zones.
And our direction as well in our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Pena.
So, my understanding is, and I think you mentioned the original point of this was to kind of put the brakes on things while we figure out a more holistic update to the bylaw. So the 15-meter, that sort of opens up. It seems to have the opposite effect of why we originally went down this road. And I'm wondering, have we had adequate time to look at all the impacts of this? And I'm thinking about, the proximity to some of the residential neighborhoods. I think there are some rules around what you can do on the second floor. So when you talk about adding 12 feet, give or take, are we thinking about a third floor on these, or are we requiring no more than 2 floors and just big floors? And I have questions too about when you speak of warehousing from a tax perspective, that may be good, but that doesn't necessarily mean many jobs, as opposed to if it's sort of a little more office-ish, and I know that there's some rules around that in the park. So I'm just wondering if you can, I guess I'm just struggling to understand why we would tackle this 15-meter thing now, as opposed to as part of the more holistic bylaw. And I heard the rationale, but I guess I'm not quite sure I'm there yet.
For you, Mayor. So the reason why we're proposing to add it now, it seemed like a quick win. We've seen a few applications recently that have proposed a slightly higher building, and that is to allow for a larger, essentially higher floors inside a multi-story building. There's not really a residential adjacency concern in most of the business park because the majority of it has no residential component in it. There's some caretakers on some of the properties. You're allowed to have 1 caretaker unit. Other than that, it will be, you know, the only neighborhood that's going to be closest to it is going to be the mixed-use district, which is under construction now, or some properties are under construction, but the buildings in that zone are also higher than 10 meters. So it seemed appropriate to go this height change now, simply because we've never resisted a height variance in the business park. And as we go through the zoning bylaw update, we might come up with a different height. This was just kind of a quick analysis of what else is out there.
So my recollection, and could be wrong, is that the variances we've given so far are in the order of a meter, meter and a half, and this seems to be a fair bit more. Am I incorrect in that?
For you, Mayor, yes, I think you're correct. We're going 4 meters higher in the sort of the business park area, and then quite a bit higher on the BCR lands. And again, that is so that, you know, if there was a proposal that came around on the BCR lands that was of heavier industrial nature that required a higher height, it could be dealt through a variance. But we could also just remove that obstacle now and reconsider it in the business, in a zoning bylaw update.
Any other questions? Council? Council Race.
I'll move first and second reading. And the public hearing. You want to do them together or separately?
Can we do them together, Molly?
Yes, both of those motions can go together.
Move them all.
Someone like to second that? Second by Councilor Anderson. Hey, you want to speak to it? No, we've tuckered everybody out. Anybody want to speak to this? Councilor Penguin.
I think I'm probably not there for supporting this. I had some hesitation on the 25 meter for the BC Rail lands, and I've been okay sort of going along with it, but I think the 15 meter on top of that at this point, I mean, for me, these are things that I would prefer to consider in a more holistic bylaw rewrite when we have a little more clarity around what sort of permitted uses we're going to have in these sorts of things, and I'm just not sure there's enough, I don't have enough comfort that some of those other rules are in place.
Thank you. Councilor Race.
Thank you, I changed my mind. So I moved that I am supporting this, and this to me is it's kind of a pause or a stopgap measure to allow us to get some of the other business park pieces together to go forward. First and second reading for me is not a question of final approval. For me, it is just it's close enough to allow to go through the public process and to go to the public hearing and hear what the public might have to say about it before the final decision, which is typically third reading. So at this stage, I think it's fine. I recognize that the height is a new thing, and I'm sort of okay with that. I think we might want to hear what the public has to say, but there are other buildings in the business park, I think, that are even going higher than that, if I recall, up to 5 stories, so for some of the mud units. So I will be supporting first and second reading.
That's over.
Thank you. In general, I'm in support of this, but the height did catch, yeah, I was surprised to see that included at this time. I was considering amending this to remove that height portion, but I think putting it to public as part of our consultation or public hearing before third reading is appropriate. So I'll support us getting there, but I'm still on the fence with the height piece.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion. I think I'd rather see the height go up, giving people more flexibility with their building while still addressing the flood construction level. I think we want to provide as much flexibility as possible in these zones for industrial uses. So I think this is a good stopgap measure until we finish the zoning bylaw. Thanks staff for their work. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pengill opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next up is our District of Squamish Floodplain Management Bylaw number 2676, 2019. Okay, we have two engineers. It's going to be riveting.
Oh, wow. Kind of lost the crowd.
Where did everybody go? I thought they came for us.
We have
They'll
that
be
effect.
so sad that they missed this presentation. I'm teasing. All right. Tell us about our floodplain control bylaw.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Olson. I'm the Manager of Municipal Infrastructure for the district. Here today to present the first three readings of Floodplain Bylaw 2676. The intent is to ultimately repeal the existing floodplain bylaw, which was adopted in December of 2017, and replace it with this new bylaw. So quickly, some background is that the Local Government Act allows local governments to designate land as a floodplain, and once that is done, to enact construction requirements within those areas. In doing so, the local government needs to consider and comply with provincial guidelines and regulations. And there is also allowance for the local government to provide exemptions as long as they're considered consistent with the provincial guidelines. So this is just a quick overview of the flood policy that the district has. The Integrated Flood Hazard Management Plan provided recommendations for OCP policy, and so that was adopted. We're just discussing the floodplain bylaw today, which regulates building elevations, setbacks, and construction specifications. So there's four main things that the floodplain bylaw does. The first is designate the floodplain, which then gives the district the ability to regulate development within those areas. It establishes flood construction levels and setbacks. The intent there is to keep new developments safe, to also preserve floodways through the community, and to maintain space for building diking or upgrading diking. To establish floodplain specifications, so just as an example, some things that the bylaw does is specifies erosion and scour protection for floodproofing fill and building foundations. It also requires that electrical components be lifted above the flood construction level, and so on. And again, that's to build, the intent there is to keep development safe and resilient. And finally, there are three different types of exemptions that are identified in the bylaw. There's general exemptions, which identifies buildings to which flood construction levels don't apply, so things like farm buildings. Local area exemptions, so the map here shows that non-residential uses within our downtown are exempt from the flood construction level. And then site-specific exemptions, which are allowed for in cases of hardship. So there are three main amendments that are being proposed here. The first, and probably the most substantial, is to remove flood-resistant materials requirements. So the current bylaw requires that all areas of buildings below the flood construction level use flood-resistant materials that are defined in the bylaw. Since adoption of the bylaw, the building department has indicated that there is a significant additional cost and effort to use these materials, and ultimately it's unlikely to reduce restoration effort. The reason for that is that in the event of a flood, waters would be contaminated with potential sewage or other contaminants, and so it wouldn't be as simple as just washing a flooded building and carrying on. They've indicated that because of contaminants and water, that walls would need to be removed, dried out. In the process of doing that, likely building materials would be damaged, and they wouldn't be. It'd be unlikely that they would be able to be reused. So it seemed like it was imposing some additional effort that wasn't achieving the desired intent. So we are recommending to remove that requirement. The second is that we're modifying a number of schedules in the bylaw. The first is to increase the setback from the Squamish River Dike from 3 meters to 7.5 meters. This is coming on the heels of the recently completed quantitative risk assessment, which has indicated that it is likely we're going to have to complete some fairly substantial upgrades to the Squamish River Dike moving forward. So this provides the space to do that. Deleting the flood-resistant material schedule, and modifying the erosion and scour protection details for building foundations and floodproofing fill. This is based on some feedback we've received from builders, and it's basically the intent is to make it more constructible and a little bit more practical for builders. Finally, there are a few refinements and some minor items, so removing unnecessary or unused definitions from the bylaw, a couple of grammatical fixes and clarification, and then the more substantial one here is removing the size limitation on garages below flood construction level. So right now the bylaw only allows garages up to 50 square meters below the FCL. That's been problematic for things like carriage homes, where if the garage is limited to 50 square meters, the question is, what do you do with the additional space? So it was posing some design complications. Squamish also went a step beyond the provincial guidelines. The provincial guidelines simply exempt garages from the FCL. They don't have a size limitation. So this brings us in alignment with provincial guidelines. So the recommendation is that the District of Squamish floodplain management bylaw number 2676 be given the first 3 readings.
Questions for clarification? Councilor Pettengill and Councilor Anderson.
I understand the rationale for removing the requirement for flood-resistant materials, but do we then take on any responsibility or authority to, after a flood, to make sure that materials are appropriately replaced or fixed or whatever, or it's just sort of we're saying hands off on this sort of thing?
That's a very good question. Most appropriately answered by the building department. I'm not sure of the exact processes for. There we go.
Welcome back.
Through you there. This is a bit of a gray area because what happens after a flood is that there is no new construction going on. What's happening is, in some cases, drywall has to be removed, the wall system has to be dried out, and then drywall has to be put back up. And in that process, often there wouldn't be a building permit required, perhaps for demolition to get rid of the waste, but unlikely in smaller homes. So I don't think the change means that the way we do permitting or our liability is any different than with flood-resistant materials or not.
Any other questions? Oh yes, you were next, Councilor Anderson. You're on my list.
During the period of the development of the management plans, integrated flood hazard management plan, the engineering department consulted with an advisory group, I believe a focus group is how you termed it. You refer here to feedback from local builders and feedback from local professionals. I just wondered how you might characterize that. Do you have a reference group, or is it a matter of current projects and industry folks coming to the door reporting circumstances?
Through the mayor, we've received some unsolicited feedback from people. And that's always valuable, that we have an open door to receiving that kind of feedback, and that has informed it. There are also a number of qualified professionals who regularly do work, and so we're in fairly regular contact with them. We have discussions about policies that are working or not working, and so that's it's not a formal group, but it's just people who regularly are using the bylaw who we've solicited some feedback and received some feedback.
Thank you.
Anything else? Given that our bylaw was based on the US model for flood-resistant materials, are they running into the same problem down south? I mean, they've sort of mandated this, but you can't possibly dry out a home without pulling off the material that you've put up there. So
Mm-hmm.
are you seeing changes down in the US as well?
We've reached out to FEMA actually, and we received sort of a stock response from them. To my knowledge, they're not considering a change in their policy, but I don't know the effectiveness of their policy in a post-flood scenario. So it's hard to speak to sort of the practical effectiveness of whether they're actually achieving their desired intent or not. All floodplains are different too. In some cases, they may not be very heavily developed and have a wastewater treatment plant, for instance, that could be flooded. It may be a relatively undeveloped floodplain where contamination issues may not be present. So it is difficult to say. I don't have good knowledge on that.
So my other question is about the garage space. And so does this change also apply to homes that are in the floodway? Because we just approved a rezoning for 2 homes on Eagle Run, and the sort of drawings we saw had the houses on stilts with sort of this sort of middle podium. Would this bylaw change now allow them to build a garage, or because of where they're situated, they would still have to build on stilts with a podium?
So in that case, they were rezoning, and there's a secondary floodway. Because of the way our flood policy is laid out, they had multiple different layers of policy to contend with. They were in a conditional densification area, which meant that in order for them to rezone, they needed to meet a set number of conditions. They're within a secondary floodway, which is the reason for that policy, and keeping the ground level open, that if there was a flood, the water would be able to pass through. So that specific, this requirement wouldn't impact their need to continue doing what they have to do, because there would have been a restrictive covenant registered on title as part of the rezoning that established their need to do what they're doing. So it doesn't impact that. This would impact any regular building within the floodplain, and it just makes it more flexible for people to build larger garages, which we have found over the past 1.5 years that a lot of people do want to do that. Clearly, Squamish people are storing a lot of things in their garages, as we know. And there's also some other things. In implementing that policy, we're thinking about single-family homes, but it technically applies to all buildings. And so you have a multifamily development that comes along, or a commercial development where clearly they have to have a garage that's larger than 50 square meters. This addresses the need for them to have to go and request a site-specific exemption. So it kind of addresses multiple points.
Okay, so if I want to build a carriage home and I'm in the secondary floodway, I can build a garage below my carriage home?
Yes, you can. You would still need a qualified professional to write a report and certify that you're not impacting the floodway in doing so.
Okay. Councilor Pettingill.
So I think we had a storage center come before us, and one of the issues was whether or not they would or could store materials and stuff that could be damaged by a flood, and that was an important part of the discussion, I think. And now here we're saying, well, build a garage as big as you want and store whatever you want in that. And so are we being consistent?
Through the mayor, so garages are a defined term in our floodplain bylaw, which is for the storage of vehicles. That's not the exact wording, but that is the intent of the definition. They are not supposed to be, people shouldn't be storing goods that are damageable by floodwaters within their garages. So that's another implicit assumption that's within the bylaw. So the garages are intended to allow for vehicle storage. It's not supposed to be so people can throw whatever they want into those areas.
So I think though, we have sort of said we're trying to move away from lots of people, lots of cars and so on. So now we're talking about a big garage and not many cars, and probably you are putting your ski-doos and sea-doos and mountain bikes and road bikes and everything else in there. So I guess I'm not sure we're sort of getting at what we want to get at here.
If I may, through Mayor, part of the reason why we recommended this change to the 50 square meter size limit is because we were finding that this was a new requirement. And we're finding with things like carriage homes, people running into problems structurally because the size of the carriage home, 70 square meters, in some cases it's more. So it's very difficult to have a small garage space underneath and then put a bigger structure on top. And given the lack of provincial guidelines in these cases, we felt it was appropriate to remove the limit.
Any other questions? Someone want to make a motion?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any more comments? Councillor Race?
Well, I only have to say with the garages, I'm absolutely, in favor of larger garages with the hope that people will actually start putting cars in one day. So if this is a step towards that, I'm good with that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Bird?
Well, flood is just such a constant risk, as we've spent a good chunk of our day discussing here. I think that these are fair changes to make. I don't know that the flood bylaws where we talk about how people use their garages, but in a flood context, I don't see any issue with increasing the garage space in the flood hazard areas. So, but maybe there is a discussion to be had about parking and how we score enclosed parking spaces versus others that might get actually used for parking. But in this context, I'm happy to support this motion.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to 8C, adoption. First up is the District of Squamish Records Retention and Disposal Bylaw number 2622. Be adopted. Moved by Councillor Pettingill.
So I had some questions and comments from the public on this, and there was concern about minutes and videos in particular, and I know last time before us I asked a bit about this, and I confirmed the community charter, I think, that minutes need to be kept. But the piece around videos, I didn't have a clear answer, and there is, I got requests that the videos, that we have some sort of policy to keep videos around forever. And I know there are storage challenges with video and so on, but a video, there's no confidentiality issues, I don't think, with a council meeting. And so stuff like that, I'm curious why we couldn't consider YouTube and mechanisms like that for something that is completely public and maybe not central. Like, I don't know if we need in the bylaw that the videos need to be on YouTube, but I think that's somehow something, some people are looking for some sort of certainty around how long videos are kept.
Our acting CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. So our videos, right now we use a archiving company, and we have a contract. It's coming up for renewal. One of the things that our IT manager has been looking at is utilizing YouTube. They have a different kind of a system than what you traditionally think YouTube is for when it comes to things like council meetings. Lo and behold, they actually have this thing. And it's searchable, you can't put random weird comments on it and things like that. So we are actually investigating what you're suggesting. That being said, Charlene and I are looking at what retention makes sense for video recordings. And I suspect that when we finish our investigation, it may not be permanent retention. It for various different reasons that we would bring back to council. Just for, best records keeping practices and what is happening with the records retention bylaws and the LGMA program itself. We're looking for consistency throughout the province so that all the municipalities are doing the same things, which makes the way we respond to FOI requests very consistent. So that is just one little tiny piece of this whole overarching puzzle. So I know that's a long answer, but it's something that we are looking at right now.
Thank you. Is that your hand? No. Okay. Does someone want to move adoption? Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw. Amendment Bylaw number 2682, 2019. Moved by Councillor Anderson. Thank you for playing. Seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Finally, District of Squamish Noise Enforcement Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 2683, 2019. Moved by, I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Staff reports. We have one item, which is the council appointment to the Squamish Food Policy Council. I was the council rep, still am the council rep. Before she left, Councillor Stoner asked if she could be appointed. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor French. She'll be so happy when she gets back. She's got more to do. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Did she really volunteer, or she's just not here?
No, she really volunteered. Not just saying this. Okay, our 2019 sewer rehabilitation program, trenchless point repairs and external point repairs tender award. Mr. Morwood.
Waiting ready.
We've all been in this room for way too long now, so.
I'll be quick, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jesse Morwood, Capital Projects Manager for the District of Squamish. Tonight I'm presenting on the tender award for the 2019 sewer rehabilitation program specific to point repairs. I'm looking for Council to approve the following resolutions of the District of Squamish award this tender to Superior City Contracting Services, and that the Mayor and Corporate Officer be authorized to execute this agreement. This is annual work for isolated point repairs on gravity sewer network. Specifically, there are 15 pipe and 24 manhole repairs covered in the scope of this work. These areas were chosen based on our CCTV inspection and assessment report done last year in the downtown core area. We posted this tender on BC Bid for 3 weeks. At the end of the 3 weeks, we received 2 tenders. Superior City Contracting was the lowest at approximately $267,000. We do have a budget of $550,000 for this program, but there's other costs, including the CCTV work that will be used for the identification of the projects for the 2020 construction year. This is a unit price MMCD contract, which means the final contract price can vary a little bit depending on the amount of materials used. We will develop a communication plan for the downtown area that will obviously notify those people that will be affected, and we'll do our best to mitigate any impacts. Following approval, we'll schedule work, hopefully starting in June. Thank you. That's it.
Any questions for clarification, Council? Someone want to move the staff recommendation?
I'll move staff.
Moved by Councilor Hertford, seconded by Councilor French. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is our consent agenda, council. There are minutes on here. There's correspondence to receive for information. One staff update, which is the memo regarding Perth Drive on-street parking. And so if you would like to discuss any of these items, you should pull them from the consent agenda. Councilor Race, then Herford, then French.
C1, memo regarding Perth Drive and a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Versus.
Councilor French? Snag yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the item I'm interested in, and if we'd like to explore if we could do that sooner than later.
Hold on. We're just pulling it for now. Councilor Pego.
I want to go 4, 5, and 6.
Pardon?
4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6 on the correspondence?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no others, I'll ask for a motion to move the rest of the consent agenda. Moved by Councilor Race, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. We can now speak to those items?
Yeah, I would do the memo just at now, because there's not really an item that fits with them.
Okay. All right, so let's speak to the correspondence first. Councilor Pettengill, you can address 4, 5, and 6, and then we'll address the memo that 3 councilors want to pull.
Just like to say I'm thankful to the students for organizing this. Looking forward to seeing this.
When you say this?
Sorry, this is the climate, student strike for climate action. And I believe some of the elementary schools may be organizing some things on their own premises because buses and stuff and notices to parents is going to be challenging, so they may be doing things at their own school. So hopefully we'll see a lot of this. It's great. Number 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, they did ask for some action on our part, so I'm wondering if it's appropriate to forward this to staff. Follow-up.
I believe the original letter was already forwarded to staff and Hydro for a response, and this was a response to that response. So it is being actioned by staff.
Okay.
And if I might, Ms. Bordeaux has been kept in the loop on that as well, on what communications have been with Hydro.
Okay, and number 6?
So number 6, it's just something that's been on my mind a lot with camping and stuff too, and you know, I just wanted to point out, I think we're all struggling with density, and one of the reasons we're doing density is to try and protect the nature and the environment that we all really appreciate. So we're trying to find a balance, and I think as we work through some of the camping things and some of this, it's hopefully we can have that understanding of that building up and building closely together is to actually achieve some of the things I think this author values.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Race, Herford, French, you can all take turns speaking to the memo if you'd like. I'll start with you, Councilor Race.
Thank you. And the memo, I'm sure we've all read it, but the memo concerns parking at the trailhead at the end of Perth Drive. When I looked at that and considered the problem, what I'm going to suggest is that we refer that to a committee of the whole for discussion. I say that because I think that we've talked in the past, perhaps in this council, but I know in previous councils, about trailhead issues generally. And some of them, of course, are kind of in remote areas, but others are in neighborhoods. And this is one of them. And so I think these trailheads in neighborhoods are raising a series of issues that we want to address, perhaps district-wide. Because I think from discussing with people, this is not the only trailhead that has issues. It may be one of the worst, but not the only one. And so I think perhaps a discussion and a strategy around these trailheads in residential neighborhoods. And that would be my suggestion, but I'll wait to hear other comments before I continue.
Councilor Herford?
Thank you. I like that suggestion. I think this is, we've had other jurisdictions very close to us have had this challenge where their trails, and thinking about North Vancouver, become a draw, and there hasn't been consideration given in the initial design of the neighborhoods to accommodate the traffic and to manage the visitors and the residents of other areas of town sort of getting to that area to use the trails. So I think a more fulsome discussion is appropriate before any construction of any sort is undertaken, to make sure that we're going in an appropriate direction in the grand scheme of things. This deferring this work and moving this forward to a committee of the whole for further discussion is not going to impact this problem. Even if this work went ahead, it doesn't affect the problem, but it affects the residents. So we should really take a closer look at this before we take any action or spend any money in this way. So I'll committee of the whole for this one.
Councilor French?
I support the comments of my colleagues and will re-emphasize that I believe that if we are going to have a committee of the whole discussion, the work that's outlined in this memo really should be put on pause until after that discussion is completed.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes, I welcome the future committee of the whole discussion on this topic. I'll just briefly like to refer to local experience on Hospital Hill being the trailhead for Smoke Bluffs Park. Penny Lane and Smoke Bluffs Road, and in fact Northridge Drive and the whole of the top of Hospital Hill are parking zones for climbers. And this has been a topic of an issue for 20 to 30 years. I'd like to point out, though, that what has worked to our benefit is having the Smoke Bluffs Park Committee, or a group that has some kind of oversight and interest in monitoring this, and this has been a real benefit to us. So I would suggest in a committee of the whole discussion, we might discuss the opportunity of a Parks Committee, a group of citizens that can monitor and advise from the perspective also of trail users. But that has worked for us, having that group of park users that can monitor and help residents with their issues.
Councilor Pagno?
I'd just like to, and I'm sure we would anyways, but just to make sure that we have a map when we have the discussion on where the road right-of-way line is. I took a bike ride up there, and the property to the south looked like it had mature trees on what I thought sort of was in line with the fence and so on. So I'm just trying to have trouble in my mind understanding where these rights-of-ways would be with all the properties around there.
I'll move that we refer this to a committee of the whole discussion.
Seconded by Councilor French.
Point of clarification.
Yep.
I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume anything, that means that none of this work in this outlined in the memo would take place until, if at all, at the earliest would be after that. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. No late agenda items. We have a recommendation from the committee of the whole meeting. The council is generally supportive of accelerating the availability of electric vehicle chargers and direct staff to provide Mr. Blackman and the Squamish Alternative Energy Group with information required by the District of Squamish that would enable the district to consider electric vehicle chargers in the 2020 budget. Someone has to move that. Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Herfer. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I should read my resolution.
Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we have a Public Arts Select Committee minutes from May 1 to be received for information. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a couple of recommendations from the Public Arts Select Committee. I don't know, Councilor French, if you want to speak to these or if we should just vote on them?
It's like, what's
Okay.
wrong?
That the Public Arts Committee support the Memquam Elementary School Public Art Project in the amount of $600 to be funded from the Public Art Committee budget, subject to approval of School District 48, and that the finished piece of public art be added to the Public Art web map. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Race. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. That the Public Art Select Committee support the Squamish Arts Council Art Camp to the amount of $1,000 to be funded from the Public Art Select Committee 2019 budget. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. That the Public Art Select Committee support the Squamish Public Library mural competition in the amount of $4,000 to be funded from the Public Art Select Committee 2019 budget. Moved by Councilor Herford, seconded by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Council and staff in-camera announcements. We
I
have.
think you missed one, 2,500 per house sound. Did you get that? Second one, 625, then 1,000.
600, 1,000. Am I missing one?
There's one in bold that the Public Art Committee allocates 2,500 to House on Secondary School.
Got cut off.
It looks like an omission in the agenda.
It's not on the word agenda, but it's on
The title is, but the body's missing.
All right, hold on.
Thank you.
320.
That the Public Arts Select Committee allocate $2,500 to the House on Secondary School Public Art Competition to be funded from the 2019 Public Arts Select Committee budget. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Pettengill. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thank you for catching that one. One staff in-camera item announcement that Council Verizon report on the concept of developing design work on modernizing our fire services infrastructure. So that's our fire halls specifically. That's all I have to do, right, for that? Okay. We've already done the unscheduled public attendance. Open question period, clarification.
Oh, yeah, just a procedural one. Do I have to go over that?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course. Just don't touch the microphone.
I just to clarify, did the Muni ticket information bylaw, the notice enforcement bylaw, associated with the camping bylaw, did that also receive first reading?
No,
Or
we did
no?
not touch them because without the camping bylaw, they're non-enforceable, so we'll wait to bring them forward when the bylaw comes back.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you. Any other items for clarification? Someone come up.
Hi, Mayor and Council. I'm Bob Versus. I live at the end of Perth. Wrote a letter. Just a clarification that the neighbor.
Also the top.
Yeah. The district, what they have wanted to do with the property will not change the problem. It just brings it closer to our house. That's the biggest issue that we have there. So I'm glad you guys are looking at bringing it to the committee of the whole, and hopefully.
So we'll get that on the agenda and we'll let you know when it's coming to committee of the whole, because that is an open meeting and you're welcome to attend if you're available and participate.
I'm not sure if this is an option, but the bottom of Kia, the wooded area, I'm not sure who owns that land. There could be lots of money.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council or staff announcements? Anybody do anything over the last few weeks? Councilor French?
I had the honor of attending the Chamber of Commerce Excellence Awards on Thursday with Mayor and Councilor Anderson, who was a nominee.
He was a nominee.
And I just would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all the other nominees and the folks who were chosen in the various categories. It was a great evening, very well put together. Quest University was an amazing host, and looking forward to next year's time.
Excellent. Any other announcements? Councillor Pettingill.
I think it was 2 Saturdays ago now, I went to the men's shed. They had a barbecue, open house, and a bit of a fundraiser. And really kind of blown away by the enthusiasm, the happiness, the gratitude for the grant you gave. I think in the scope of the grants, it wasn't one of the bigger ones, but it seems like it really made a difference. And you know, just how excited all those people were about stuff they're doing. It's one of those things where it makes you feel like, oh, maybe I'm doing something good here. And it was really nice.
That's great. Any other announcements? I was part of the Squamish Yacht Club Sail Past on the 11th. It was a great, beautiful afternoon. I don't have a lot of friends with boats, so it was a different way to see our community and met a lot of great people. And yeah, I was really privileged to participate in that event. Other than that, I've been in a lot of meetings. Any other announcements? Okay, motion to close. Because we haven't finished.
No.
This is special.
Different.
Oh, yeah. Why is it on there then? Motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries.